Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special episode of Andrew Talks to Awesome People, where we're turning the tables on him. Today, it's Awesome People Talk to Andrew. The whole thing with this show is Andrew has no idea who's coming. He doesn't know who's going to show up. He doesn't know the questions or any of that stuff, but he's here anyway. So, Andrew, welcome to the show, your own show. You're
Hello,
a
I'm
guest unknown.
terrified, but good to see you,
This is
Mark.
going to be great. Hold on one second here. I'm having an audio fun thing.
Because we're
Yeah,
audio
Andrew, tell the
people.
people who you are. Nobody knows.
Hi, I'm Andrew Scheps, and I'm frightened.
Awesome. Nice. All right, now I can hear you again.
Yeah,
Great.
good.
Yeah, awesome. So, yeah, this is going to be interesting. So, basically, the format of this is going to be I'm going to do my best to follow the way that you would interview people, where you would go chronologically from the beginning. But because we have a whole bunch of guests, I have no idea what's going to happen. It could go totally crazy.
A
We
whole
might go off the
bunch.
rails, all of that. Yeah.
Good
So
to
if
go.
we go off the rails, we're just going to kind of go with it and have some fun. Chat room, good to see you guys here. Definitely make sure that you drop your questions for Andrew. We're going to try and do some Q&A at the end. As with some of your past interviews, I don't know how we're going to do this in one part, so there might be a part two. We'll see how it goes, especially with guests being on and everything. But let's do it. This
All
will be kind of
right.
fun. So we'll go back to the beginning, and I want to talk about what records made you perk up and pay attention to music.
Uh, well, shouldn't we start with I started out as a baby?
No,
Uh,
I'm not
no,
interested in
okay, we're gonna skip right to the music thing.
yeah.
Um, I mean, I've given like versions of this answer a lot. I mean, in the record that made me realize that record making was a thing was Tomorrow Never Knows on Revolver. Like, because
Mm,
that was the first time I like noticed it was not a band just playing stuff.
yeah.
And I don't know if I was like 8 or 9 or something like that. It's weird because I grew up. My brother's jazz tenor player, so I listened to a lot of jazz. My parents listened to a lot of classical, and then I sort of sideways discovered rock because my mom was friends with a DJ at a local station in Columbus, Ohio. And we used to just go over there, and the guy would take all the 45s that they were done with and just dump them in my mom's trunk. And then we'd take them home and just listen to them.
Yeah.
So that was, I don't know, it was just all kinds of stuff. I mean, by the time I was buying records, like my first record was Night at the Opera, Queen,
Yeah.
and I saved up for that for a while. And then I was off into Progland and stuff. But I mean, the first one that made me think about
Mm,
record making was definitely Tomorrow Never Knows.
yeah. Amazing. Okay, so you went over to a local DJ in Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah, and I don't
Yeah.
remember what station, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. I'm also from Columbus, Ohio, as you know. And I've edited your Wikipedia to say that your favorite place that you've ever lived is Columbus, Ohio.
Nice.
So, yeah, yeah. It might still
Perfect.
be up for submission, but yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but what were you doing in Columbus, Ohio? Where did you grow up? Tell us about that.
Well, I was born in Cleveland,
Hmm.
which most people don't admit, which is a little weird. But I think back then, like Cleveland was where the river caught on fire. Like that's what Cleveland
Yeah,
was famous for.
right.
But my dad was a college professor, so he did his PhD at Case Western in Cleveland, and then he got a job at Ohio State. So he was teaching at Ohio State, which was
Hmm.
cool because I got to go rehearsals of the marching band, which was right when they started doing the script Ohio, and then the tuba
Yeah,
player would run out and dot the I. So I got to see that live,
nice.
and we were there till I was in fourth grade. But both my parents were from New York; they grew up in the Bronx, and my
Hmm.
mom wanted to be closer to her family, and so my dad got a job at Stony Brook University, so we moved out there. Yeah, after third grade. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah,
and then I was
awesome.
there through high school, and my dad's still there.
Yeah, cool. Nice. What was he teaching at Ohio State?
English, English.
Cool.
He's a specialist in medieval Scottish poetry,
Amazing.
as you
Wow.
do.
Yeah. Okay. So you found Revolver and you got Nine at the Opera. Um,
Yeah.
what else was going on at that time? I know you were playing trumpet and flugelhorn. early on?
Yeah, I started on French horn. I wanted to play drums, and my parents didn't want me to play drums. And
Hmm.
their idea was, play something melodic. And so I started on French horn. I think it was in fourth grade or fifth grade when you could start an instrument. The
Yeah.
music program in my schools was pretty awesome. I was really, really lucky.
Yeah.
So, but then I wanted to play in the jazz ensemble, not just, the wind ensemble and the orchestra. So I switched to trumpet. I was okay, you
Hmm.
know. I mean, in high school, I was fine. Um, so I did that all the way through high school. And then when I went to college, the music engineering program at Miami was a music major. So I actually have a diploma in trumpet performance, which is one of the most ridiculous things ever because the brass
Well,
faculty hated me.
yeah.
Absolutely hated. Yeah.
Well, we'll get to it later, but you've
Yeah,
actually
okay.
played trumpet on some records, so
I
that came in
have. Yeah.
handy. Yeah.
I have. It's actually cool. Carmen Rizzo, who I had on the show pretty early on. I
Yeah.
played on a few for him, and I was doing electric trumpet at that point. I started doing that in high school because Miles Davis was just my absolute idol as a
Yeah.
trumpet player, certainly. Yeah, and then he had me play on some stuff, and then I've played on most of the low roar records.
Hmm.
So I don't play often, and I always say Pro Tools, and I play trumpet,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so you were, in high school playing instruments. What was the process of deciding I'm going to go to school for this like? How did that happen?
I think that I kind of realized that I wasn't good enough to be a professional musician. And I hadn't really found something that was like, okay, that's what I really, really, really want to do. And but I was doing lights because I love the, push a button and something happens thing. And I was
Mhm.
the kid who used to take stuff apart and it didn't always go back together.
Yeah.
Um, and so I love that idea. And then I sort of saw that I could be part of bands, but not have to be good enough to play in a band. And I wasn't going to be in a rock band playing trumpet, but that's kind of what I wanted to be in.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I saw my first studio and then got a Mix magazine and like that's it. And Ken Pullman was writing articles for Mix magazine at the time. Digital audio was kind of new, and he's sort of the guru of digital audio at that point,
Hmm.
along with other people. But he was really involved, and he was the head of the program at Miami.
Yeah.
So that's what
Awesome.
made the decision for me to go down there.
Yeah. And you've said in other interviews too, there were two schools that were offering it at that time, right? 4-year
Yeah, I
programs.
mean, it could have been more than that, but the only two I knew of that offered 4-year degrees. My parents were adamant I would go to college and get a actual bachelor's degree. I wasn't going to get an associate degree or whatever. And the
Yeah.
only two I knew of were Berkeley in Boston and University of Miami.
Yeah.
There were
Cool.
plenty that did like you could do a minor in it, or there were lots of really good 1 and 2 year schools, but those were the
Hmm.
only two with 4-year diplomas in it.
Yeah. So how about when you presented the idea of going to school for music engineering to your parents? How'd that go?
They were totally cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my brother had already gone to New England Conservatory for performance.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they were great. I mean, other than not letting me play drums,
Yeah.
they were
Right.
very supportive. And as a
Nice.
parent, I can sort of understand, you know.
That's great because I have somebody here that I want to verify that with and see if
Oh
that,
my God.
you know, really transferred over to her. Joining us now is Xanthi Scheps. How's it going, Xanthi?
Hello.
Hey.
Oh no. I
How
mean,
are
hi
you?
Sandy. Good.
Awesome.
Um,
We spoke recently, so I don't
Yeah.
think she's mad at me at the moment.
Well, we'll find out.
well, you did abandon our call. There's that. You
Well,
abandoned
I
our
had to
call
get
to
ready
go
for
speak to your
this.
father.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Xanthi, we were just talking, which I think you were able to hear, but we were just talking about how Andrew presented his idea of college to his parents, and I thought we should bring you on to see if that was your experience when you went off to college.
My dad is an incredibly supportive parent and an incredibly patient parent. And I spent a lot of his money attending NYU and not finishing with a degree. So, and he still speaks to me.
I do. We did
That's-
convince her to leave after 3 years.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Well, this makes for boring TV. I was hoping you'd have something juicier than that.
Oh, she's got plenty of mean stuff to
Yeah.
say.
I have tons of mean stuff to say. Tons.
That's awesome. Xanthi, what was it like for you growing up with your dad in the record industry?
You know, I didn't really understand what he did for a decent chunk of my life. And I just knew that sometimes strange people would come over to our house and my mom would make them tea. And hopefully they would play with me.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they did, and sometimes they didn't. But it was, yeah, as I got older and I knew what he did, it was great. It was really great to be able to go out and listen to what he had been working on and hear it changing as he worked on it. And it was, yeah, it was really great. And it was nice that he was lucky enough to have his studio at home. So we got a lot of dad being home time, even though he was working crazy hours and all of that.
Yeah.
Can I add 2 specific things to the having the studio at home and bands coming over? One was a Norwegian band called Zeromancer that I did a record with James Saez, and we were recording all the overdubs at my place, and they became the extra daddies because only like one of them would be playing and the rest of them would go out in the driveway and play soccer, or they would go into the house and sit around with Xanthi drawing pictures with crayons. There were a lot of pictures on the wall when they finished. And the other thing is they didn't like, they sort of kind of knew what I did, but they weren't like, they were sort of like whatever until I worked with SpongeBob and Patrick. And these are the signed SpongeBob and Patricks that I have. And I got them to make a little SpongeBob and Patrick. Actually, I think it was just SpongeBob, or did Patrick join in?
No,
he did too.
No, it was both.
Yeah, it was both of them. They did special things for both Xanthi and Jake. And that's when I think I really became a cool dad. I was like, whatever until then.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, the SpongeBob movie was a big turning point. I thought that you were going to talk about when your mother-in-law almost called the cops on, I don't remember who it was. Who was it who was coming over to the studio and Gangan?
No,
thought that it was a lurker?
I don't know. No. This was even worse. This was that same band, Zeromancer.
No. I'm not talking about that. It was Jack Black.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That's amazing.
But we made up for it because she got to go out to dinner with Josh Groban, which she was super excited about.
Nice.
But yeah, she did think that Jack Black was, but then she met him and thought I think she said he's a very nice boy.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. We're gonna try and jump back to college times here. Xanthi, if at any point you want to jump back in, let me know. There's an interview chat in the green room thing. Feel free to just all caps on there if you want to jump back in.
Amazing.
And let me know.
I'm going to get back to work so that I can try and make some money to repay my dad for NYU.
Awesome.
Excellent.
It's been recorded. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Xanthi.
Love you, Xanthi.
Love you. Bye.
All right. So we're now at we're at not NYU. That's where Xanthi was. We're in Miami. And we're going to talk about some of those years. To do that, I have a guest that also went to Miami. So everybody welcome John Paterno.
John Paterno.
Mr. Scheps, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. How are you, Mr. Paterno?
I'm
For some
doing
reason,
very well,
we address
thank
each
you.
other as Mr. Yeah.
Oh, John, I'm going to do this live. Guess what I found?
What did you find?
Boom. Your right and left are now swapped.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that's my right. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
now you have to
Lovely.
reacclimate. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I told him because you realize you're like this, and then you just keep going.
Yeah, right. Trying to get back on. Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
Mr. Scheps, I'm so glad they're doing this with you. I've already learned a bunch. So there you go.
It's great. Yeah.
Nice.
So you guys were both students in Miami, and I
Yep.
thought it would be great to hear about some of that. Maybe like any run-ins that you guys had or shared experiences at Miami. What was it like going to school there?
You start,
Floor is
John.
yours.
Well, we overlapped on the softball field, actually. Andrew, I got a late start at Miami, although I think he and I are the same age. Well, I'm probably a little bit older, but I got a late start, and we met on the softball field where Andrew would play barefoot and without a glove.
Yeah. Which, yeah, we had a music engineering team, and Ken Pullman played on it. He would pitch. He would just show up on his bicycle and pitch. And yeah, our team kind of didn't give a shit, which was great. Um, yeah, because like Battle Cat's out in the outfield with a glove and a wine cooler. And so the ball would come out there and he'd get the ball and then he'd have to like take his glove off and then put the wine cooler down and then get the ball out of the glove before he could throw it in. But I seem to remember we beat a couple of fraternities and they were pissed.
We did. Yep.
They were
Because we didn't
really
give a
mad.
shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing. Did you guys have classes that you were in together when you were in Miami?
I don't think so. No,
I
because
don't
we were
think so.
different years on the classes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
What
we
was,
we had some similar experiences, I think, with professors and all night sessions and
Yeah.
yeah.
completely
Yeah.
dead performance areas. Yeah.
And then way too live performance areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there were two studios, and the live room for one was sort of the main concert hall, which had a reverb time of what, like 3.5, 4 seconds, maybe even longer, 6,
Mm-hmm.
something crazy. And then they built a little booth right next to the control room, which was an anechoic chamber. And then there was an 8-track studio, which actually had a great sounding room because it was the jazz ensemble like practice room,
Mm.
but no microphones. I seem to remember there were like 4 mics, and you had to sign out mics when you did a session there.
Yep.
Do you
Yep.
remember what those mics were?
No, I have no idea.
Bunch of RE15s probably.
Probably, yeah,
Yep.
something like
Nice.
Yep. But
Yeah.
Miami did have one thing though that that led you on to your next phase. I mean, they had us in clavier.
yeah, yep. They got it. I think it was in my junior year. It might have even just been the senior year.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they had one with monophonic sampling and FM. And I was the guy who just anytime anything came in, I went up and read the manual. Like, okay, I'm going to learn how to use this stupid thing. And the synclav was definitely one of them.
Well, it served you pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, first job out of college was working for them. Because I thought I would do what most of us did, which was to go intern at a studio and work our way up and do that. But Mark Luer, who was a year ahead of me, got a job with them. And then they had an opening. And he just called and said, well, do you want to work here? And I realized that getting paid might be better than not getting paid.
And then they not only did you get the job with them, they sent you off to Europe.
Yeah,
Was that
I was
right off the bat.
Yeah, I went up to New Hampshire, Vermont, right on the border there, and did training for a month, 2 months. I don't remember exactly. And then I was working out of the LA office, and then they had an opening in the London office. And I'll go. And they said yes. So I went, which is good because I met my wife who's over there.
Hi, Debbie.
Hello, John. Nice to. Well, I can see you.
She's off camera and refuses to come on camera.
Well, it's nice to hear you. Definitely.
Yeah.
You.
And it was great because the London office covered most of Europe at that point. So, yeah, quite the opportunity.
So where did you get to work on synclaviers then in Europe? Was it all over or mostly England?
No, it was all over. I went up to Benny Anderson's place several times, which was great. I did a few in Spain, which was amazing. That's when it seemed as though every single person in Spain smoked and there were ashtrays in elevators. Like, just amazing. And I still smoke then. So it's like, oh my God, it's paradise. Um, and a lot in England and then a lot in France too, because at one point I was traveling back and forth and I'd gotten my passport stolen when I was moving in London. So I had a passport issued in London for me, but they'd never gotten me my working papers. So I was a little bit illegal at that point, and now I'm going to get deported. Now I'm a citizen now. It's all fine. So at one point I was coming back in and they said, you're American, you don't have a single stamp from the US in this passport, and you've got like 30 from all over Europe. You're not coming in.
Ooh.
And so we had to figure out what to do. And so they sent me to Paris for 6 weeks while they tried to sort out the working papers. And so it was great. So I saw every single client in Paris and hung out for a bit. And then I came back. But the stupid thing was I had to go to Holland a few times and I still had dreadlocks then. And every single time I came back from Holland, the UK customs and, the inspectors were like, okay, where are the drugs? Like, I got nothing because I didn't do any drugs at all, really. And they'd like, yeah, okay, you've got drugs. And they'd turn out the pockets, they'd look through the bag, and it was every single time. And they'd get so bummed out that I didn't actually have anything. But it would take me at least half an hour to get through every
Man.
time.
So much for the random searches. They yeah.
A little bit of profiling, I would say.
Yep. How tall were you at that point?
Well, at that point, I thought that I was 6'5".
Okay.
It turns out I was just under 6'4".
Okay.
But I thought 6'5" would fly because we have a mutual friend, Rich Tonis, who is 6'7". And I thought, well, I'm about 2 inches shorter than him. But it turns out a little more than that. And I know that height is an issue here.
Yes.
So.
Yes. Well, I had to ask.
Yeah. No, I will be completely honest. I might have even started shrinking by now, but I haven't been measured recently.
Okay. All right. Fun facts from Andrew Scheps. Perfect.
Yeah.
Debbie, do you have a tape measure?
Get one.
Later in the show. We'll do.
Yeah.
So how long were you with New England Digital?
I mean, in vague terms, it was about a year and a half in Miami and a year and a half in London.
Okay.
So almost 3 years. I think including the training, it was probably 3 years.
And then from there, you ended up working for somebody exclusively, but you were, am I right? Did you go on tour at that point or?
No, not right away. So as has happened many times in my career, at some point I realized, wait a minute, I'm not making records. And I always thought like, that's what I want to do. So that's why I quit the job at NED. And I still love the job. I mean, and the people you got to hang out with was insane. I mean, I got to go hang out with Frank Zappa. Like he was there at his house while I'm doing stuff. Like that's pretty badass. But anyway, I wanted to make records. And so that's why I left NED. And so I got back to LA and I called this guy, John Barnes, who'd had a synclavier and I'd fixed it a few times. And Carmen Rizzo had been an engineer for him when I first met him. And I called the studio he had a room at every single day for, I think, 3 months or something like that. And then they had a project that came up and he knew that I was a geek and he was scoring a film. And I think it was the first time he'd done a film. And this is back when that was really difficult because you had a 3/4 inch video deck. They were working on analog tape, but there was some digital stuff. And to actually make that stuff sync is really hard. Yeah. And I was the guy who could do that. So I got to work with him. And then I worked with him, not exclusively, but I did a lot of stuff with him for years.
Yeah, I remember that name. I remember you talking about him often when we see each other.
Yeah, huge help to me. I mean, he's the reason I ended up doing quite a few other things. Like, and just watching him work, so musical and such a great player. And he actually had one of the best like studio trick things ever. He had a string patch on the synclavier that he would use pretty much on every song because it was whatever. It was like, I think it was the factory sound, which was really good. And then he tweaked it a little bit and layered some stuff. And way up on the keyboard, he had a note that had sympty bleed in it, really, really quiet, like time code bleed, which was every engineer's nightmare. Because the time code is this square wave, but it's going through patch bays and stuff. And so it could start bleeding and you don't know if it's the tape machine. And so if he was like, they were giving him a hard time or he thought someone was being a dick, he would sequence that note and then he'd say, look, just let me know when you sort it out. And usually it took about an hour before they said, we think it's coming from the synclavier. It's like, oh, really? And then he'd just take that note out of the sequence and like, oh, yeah, it's fixed. It was great. I don't think he did it that often, but yeah, it was there. It was in the toolkit.
But under the right circumstances, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's really good.
And he had an engineer, Jack Rubin, who was amazing. I learned so much from him. Like, he was the first guy who was effortless, like Al Schmidt effortless. Like him sitting behind a board and doing nothing made stuff sound better. So I learned
exactly what you mean. Yep. Yeah, that's very Al Schmidt. That whole Zen of Al thing.
Yeah.
He's not doing anything, but yeah.
Yeah.
But it's all there. Totally. So John Barnes for a bit, and then that led you to meeting Carmen, and then and what else was going on around that time?
I met Carmen before, when I was still working in the LA office, actually.
Oh, okay.
So he was engineering a lot for John at that point. And then when I came back and I was freelance and actually just working on stuff, that's when Jack was the engineer. And in between getting back to LA, and even after, while I was still working for John, because he didn't have work for me all the time, I was putting together people's MIDI studios and, just hustling, trying to do anything. But I had the Synclav, thing that I could do. So that helped quite a bit. But yeah, then John was sort of the biggest client for a while.
But you've always been the smartest guy in the room. Just like you are right now.
That. Well, and what the worst part about that is they say if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. So,
well, I wouldn't say that, but it makes sense that you were able to fuse this, all your tech knowledge and all your reading of the manuals and finding a way to make things happen for yourself, even if it wasn't exactly where you were supposed to be. I think that's a really cool, it's a really cool thing to do.
I think it also came from part of realizing I'm not a good enough trumpet player to do that. Like, okay, so, and it's, it's sort of the core of the imposter syndrome. So the way to overcome that was to have one thing that wasn't subjective, that I felt like, okay, I know how to do this and nobody can say that I don't. And a lot of people can't. So I can walk into the room, make things sync up or whatever, edit stuff in a way that no one else was doing at that time, or, that was always my edge. And so that made me feel somewhat comfortable being in the room and not like a complete imposter.
Well, you've done it seamlessly for forever. I don't know that I've ever seen you completely, I don't think I've ever seen you any flustered at all around anytime I'd been around you. Just doing anything.
That happens. That's in the car on the way to the studio. Like, seriously, there were a few sessions where I'd actually pull over on the side of the road on the way there. And like, okay, you're not going to turn around and pretend you're sick. You're going to go to the studio. And then, once you get there, 5 minutes in, it's okay. But yeah, but you can't be flustered in the studio because you're screwed.
Yeah. You have to find your way through. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Interesting.
Amazing. So, in leading out of Synclavier into LA, so you wound up there because of Synclavier, yeah?
Yeah, it was first in LA working for them, then London working for them. And when I quit in London, I still didn't have, I think they'd finally got me working papers, but I didn't have a visa other than that. So if I wasn't doing that very specific job, I couldn't stay.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, the last thing I'm going to do is push that, because as they say on the Joe Paris show, I'm on a freaking list. Like I didn't want to be banned forever, especially
Yes.
since I'd met my wife at that point. So, so I went back to LA because I knew lots of people. I had a place I could live, which was
Mm-hmm.
good. And I felt like and at that point, it's probably a little bit of a myth, but Nashville felt like you don't go there unless you want to work on country. And I'd grown up near New York, and it was a difficult scene. Whereas LA, it felt like you could just go from studio to studio, and you knew people. So yeah, that was the obvious place for me to go back to when I started freelancing.
Yeah. Awesome. And my goal here is not to repeat too much that's already been said in a lot of other awesome interviews that you've done. Specifically, I would point people to Working Class Audio with Matt Boudreau. You have 2 interviews on there that are really great that you guys covered a lot of this period. One thing that I'm interested in is, as well as the Pensados Place ones too, those are fantastic, but what was the transition from Synclavier into you starting on your first sessions? What did that period look like?
Um, Well, I mean, one thing was that Carmen Rizzo actually pulled me into lots of sessions. Like he didn't need to, but I would
Mm-hmm.
show up and then I'd tune vocals or I'd do stuff for him, sort of be an extra assistant, but then he would let me engineer. So
Yeah.
that was huge. That was a big start. And it was always like the technical thing that would get me in the room, but then I could do other stuff,
Yeah.
So once I wasn't the tech, then I would only be in the room if it was a session. So I started to be on session. So I'd go in there as a SyncLab operator, and then later on as a Pro Tools editor, and then as a
Mm-hmm.
vocal tuner or whatever. But that's what got me in, was the technology.
Yeah. Yeah. When you were in those rooms, either to like fix a problem or whatever it was, were you just fixing while also observing everything and just soaking it all in at that time? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, the sessions would be stopped. It's like
right.
if it
Yeah.
was someone's home system, like with Benny Anderson, he just like wouldn't be working, and he'd hang out, but you
Mm-hmm.
just fix it. Like, okay, cool, and then he would get back to work. But sometimes it was in the middle of big sessions, but there was nothing to take in while you're doing it. You're just working as fast as possible to try and get the session back up and running.
Mm-hmm.
But then once it was fixed, they'd usually want me to hang around for a little bit just in case, because you never
Right.
trust anything
Right.
30 seconds after someone says it's working. So, I mean, I remember in particular hanging out on a Dire Straits session at Air Studios when it was still in Oxford Circus. And I was probably there for an hour,
Mm-hmm.
just cuz.
Yeah.
And, that was great. And I would deal there was a guy named Ron Eve who worked for Mark Knopfler, and he was the guy who sort of took care of the SyncLab for him. So I already would have somebody I knew pretty well in those situations. It wouldn't just be an irate phone call. Like Ron called and said, dude, the thing's broke. Well, he didn't say dude because he's English, but get over here right now and sort it out. But then it was someone who could say, like, let's have Andrew stick around for a little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was a lot of
Yeah.
stuff, but I wasn't working on those sessions ever. It was only once I'd quit NED and was programming them that then I was in on the sessions.
Yeah. Did you ever have any scary moments while you were fixing those? Was there ever like a major session that was stopped down and it was like it was on your back to get everything rolling again?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to remember specifically. I remember that Dire Straits session was a big deal because
Yeah.
there were, it wasn't an orchestra in there, but there were a lot of musicians and they were waiting because it was playback,
Right.
and if you're working on a single analog machine, you weren't going to spend 8 tracks tracking the SyncLab stuff because that might change anyway. So
Mm.
it's just getting dragged behind it on time code. So when it goes, you don't have any of it.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. So, um, yeah, I can't remember, but it was always a little bit of a panic because also, I mean, it was a really complicated system. And I wasn't like at the component level. I just had cases and cases of circuit boards. But that thing must have had, even a small SyncLab had to have over 100 circuit boards in it. And they all did different things. Like some
Yeah.
were redundant, every voice card had 4 voices or whatever, but you absolutely had to understand how the whole thing worked and by the symptoms do it. And then sometimes the symptom was that fire had come out of one of the power supplies.
Right.
And so you fix the power supply, and then you're just like, well, okay, what else did it burn?
Right.
Because every power
Right.
supply was directly behind a rack of cards. So yeah,
Yeah.
they were big.
Mhm.
Yeah. It sounds, yeah. It seems like some of those situations could have been pretty stressful. Like, yeah, sweating bullets.
Well, and then also, like, there was a guy who was down in San Diego, and really nice guy. And I'd driven down there a couple of times, and he was a pilot. And so he said, "Man, why don't you come down? I've got a little two-seater, and I'll fly you." So that was awesome. We went from Santa Monica Airport to wherever we landed. But it was also like, okay, in my van, I have 12 road cases full of stuff. And now I got to go fix this guy's thing, and I need to bring like a briefcase. And so I had to think I knew what it was going to take, and I got lucky. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, I'm down there, and we're not going to fly back up for me to grab a circuit board and then go back down again. So
Yeah.
yeah, there were some really interesting situations because these were also really expensive. So it was not like very few studios owned them, almost none. It was always an individual, a composer, a musician, or a lot of film score people were working on
I
them.
see. Yeah. Okay. So really, I don't think I knew that. I think I always assumed it was studios that had them because of the price tag, which in late 80s money was around, it was like
Anywhere from
500 or
150,000 up to you could once they had hard disk recording, you could spend $500,000
yeah.
if you went crazy.
Yeah. That's insane.
I mean, that would be hard. But when I first started, they sold 10 megabyte, that's
Mhm.
megabyte, 10 megabyte hard drives for $10,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That brings up all kinds of questions about did you think we'd be where we are today? You know, at
No,
that time. Yeah.
I saved up
Absolutely
for,
not.
I'm looking at Debbie, I think I saved up for about a year to get a 1 gigabyte hard drive. And I thought,
Yeah.
man, I would never fill this thing up,
Yeah.
ever. And that was around 92, I guess, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you made Bounce Factory. All right.
Yeah, right after.
Yeah, right after that. You're like, I have a gigabyte hard drive. I'll program this thing. Well,
Yeah.
okay. So, John, I know you have some questions about some stuff that happens, I believe, a little bit later around A. Jackson, not Alan. So,
Which isn't that much after what we're talking about, to be honest.
yeah, but okay. So when you also just mentioned Carmen Rizzo, John, was that in between meeting Carmen
Carmen, once I got back in LA and was freelance, that was sort of the next, 10 years or so on and off, he'd call me in on sessions, just
Amazing.
to give me work. Yeah, basically.
Well, joining us now is the one and only Carmen Rizzo.
Hey, what an
I forgot
intro,
to say all
Andrew.
the bad stuff, man.
Yeah. John, if you want to pop back in when we get to that, I'd love to get your question on there.
Okay.
So, okay.
You got it.
All right. Awesome. I'll have you in the green room there.
Okay.
Just before Carmen starts, I've got to say, the one thing I
What?
really remember is the very first time I met him, he had the coolest fucking shoes ever. They were like patent leather checkerboard, and they were incredible.
That was, yeah, I remember those. That was the Susan Rogers era. I have a photograph of me and Susan back there with those shoes on. Wow. Well, look, first of all, congratulations. This is your hour or hours, I don't know. And I had to be on this. I could not be on this.
That's so awesome.
And I'm down the road from you. I'm at Friar Park.
Yeah,
So
I know. The place
know.
you can't invite me, blah, blah, blah.
not yet, but I'm taking a break from the session because I had to.
Oh, I guess his break's over.
I'll come back on soon, not by yourself. And now here's Andrew talks to himself. Awesome. Okay, here he comes. And get him back here.
Hello.
Okay, you are back.
There.
There we
Okay.
go. Awesome.
Can you hear me?
There you are. Yep. Yeah.
Okay. I think it's good Wi-Fi here, so I'm not sure what. But anyway, I don't even know where to start. I mean, am I supposed to like roast you or talk about how I met you or what's up?
I have no idea. Mark refused to answer any questions before this
All right.
started. So
Well,
whatever you want.
Yeah.
okay. I can tell you because I was thinking about this, right? And I was thinking everyone's going to, blah, 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 and knowledge and, put you on a pedestal, which you well deserve and as you should. But I was thinking, what could I tell the audience that maybe they don't know, which is maybe how we met. And I might have been one of your first friends
Yeah,
and I guess you could say clients in Los Angeles. So, how I met
absolutely.
Andrew, for whoever is listening, um, I was working for John Barnes, who was a very successful musician, songwriter. May he rest in peace because he died last year. Um, and he was working for Michael Jackson, and so he was pretty successful. And he was one of the first people, besides Michael Boddicker, maybe, who was a big session player back then, having a lot of keyboards and samplers. And he had a Synclavier and a Fairlight and everything that you can imagine. And so we had a Synclavier that needed to be serviced. And I know you guys were talking about that earlier in the show. And we call, and beautiful Andrew Scheps shows up with no beard.
No beard.
and um, and we fell in love at first sight. We became good mates, and he was a baseball fan, and I'm a baseball fan. And he was a Mets fan, which was okay, because as a kid, I was a Mets fan, but I'm a Dodger fan. And so we just struck it up and became really good friends, and we would nerd out. And then, of course, over the years, we became even, closer. And I remember when your kids were born and as they grew up, and you were still married, though, I believe, right? You and Debbie were already married, right?
Well, Jake was at the wedding, but he was only 3 days old.
No, no, no. But when I met you,
No, because I
you
met
weren't
Debbie
married.
no, because we met right when I moved out to LA. Then I went to
Exactly.
work in the London office, which is when I met Debbie, and then
Okay.
moved back. So all the sessions we did
Okay.
were, I was already married.
Okay. So, but the great thing that I can talk about with you is that, yes, we did a lot of sessions together. And yes, in the beginning, I guess you could say I hired you to do various things. And then I realized you played the trumpet. And I was like, yo, you got to get on these sessions, mate. So then you played trumpet on a few of my records.
Yeah.
I don't think people know that.
Yeah, the two
Which,
that really stand out in my mind were the Povey record, which was
yes,
I think one of your first bands, really, right,
that
as an
was
artist.
one of my first bands. Yeah, it was with me and Christar from Australia. Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Ekova record, which I'm super proud
That's
of.
right. That's one of my favorite records. When people notice that, I'm very proud. And that's right. You did play trumpet on one of those songs. That's right. Wow, I forgot about that. And then, of course, we've got great history with lots of other countless. I mean, with Wendy and Lisa and the John Barnes stuff. And I don't even remember how many records we've done, I think, together, right?
Tons. You brought me in on so many records. It was
Yeah.
ridiculous.
No.
Yeah.
Well, look, I'm so happy to be a sliver of your career, and I'm so proud of you as a friend and a colleague. And I'm glad that the show is flipped, so people are speaking to you and giving you praise. So, how does it feel for you now to
Really
flip?
uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable.
Well, I'm certain Mark has an all-star list of people that are going to talk to you, but I just wanted to pop on, especially since I'm not quite down the road, but I'm not that far, right, from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
She
Oh,
couldn't see us.
Yeah.
now he's gone
We
again.
lost him again. Okay. We'll wait for him to get back. I'm interested to hear about some of the records that you guys worked on together and see if we have some good stories in there.
Well,
Very
I mean, it's hard to remember specific. Mark was just saying, are there like specific
Okay.
stories of the albums we worked on?
Mm.
I mean, the Bronx Style Bob stuff. I don't even think I actually worked on that, but I got to hang out during that record, which was awesome.
I don't remember. You were on that too. I mean, for so much of my, career, you were a part of almost every record, whether it was whatever you wanted to do, and and then through that, you met a lot of my friends and other like Chris Bruce and Joel Shear and Jimmy Mahobrak and Earl Harvin, and you go down the list.
Yeah.
And oh yeah, and then you even worked with Shara with My Brightest Diamond.
Yeah.
So we have a long history, but I'm going to see you in November in Prague, where I live
I
now.
think so. Yeah.
Right?
I hope so.
Yeah. So yeah, I hope so too. So, but I'll be back in London at the end of August. So we have to make this. We have to physically see each other here.
Yes. Yes, we do. Worst case, you just come a
So,
day early and come out and see me.
And me.
And Debbie.
and Debbie. Well, I'm taking a train up to Edinburgh. Is that on the way?
No.
Not really. Okay, well, fair enough. Anyway, I'm going to tune out because I'm in a session, but I had to pay you love and respect to you and Debbie and to the kids and to the show, which everyone loves the show. And I am honored to call you a dear friend.
Man,
so
well,
congratulations. I love you.
Love you too, Carmen.
Awesome.
All
Carmen,
right,
thank
guys.
you so much for being on. Yeah.
Of course. Of course. So lots of love,
right.
and I'll see you later.
All right.
Cheers.
See you, Carmen.
Ciao. Bye.
Andrew, there's people in the chat room they're making the comment that this is your episode of This Is Your Life.
Yeah, and you're Groucho Marx.
I've never seen the show, so I don't know who that is. But
right. I think that was a Groucho one, right? I'm asking Debbie, who grew up in the UK, so she probably wouldn't know. I think he did that. He said he did What's My Line, but I think he also did This Is Your Life. Maybe not. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That's I'm wasting time.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm gonna bring John back up here to tag team with me here. And here he comes. Here's John. Hello, John.
I'm back.
He's
All
back.
right, so I'm getting a little fuzzy on our timeline here. So you started with Carmen about when?
Well, Carmen I met in 88 or 89 when I first came out to LA. That was the first time I met him. And I wasn't really doing sessions for him while I was in the LA office there. So a year and a half then I was in London for a year and a half. And then when I moved back, when he had sessions he could bring me on, he did. And like he was saying, that was for years. I mean, he would just have me come in and record overdubs or just anything, which is awesome because most people, I mean, it was back in the day when budgets were a bit better, but he didn't need to spend any money having me in there, and he did, which was really, really amazing. He always called it spreading love, and that's what he did. And he was really, really generous with that. Then that period was also when I started working for John Barnes, but Carmen wasn't working for him then. And I was doing a lot of MIDI programming and blah, blah, blah. And so that sort of led up to the touring, which would have been 92. 92 was the first tour.
Okay. And the first tour was with?
Stevie Wonder, which was pretty awesome. So a friend of mine, Todd Herman, was the keyboard tech for that tour. And one of the funniest things was Todd Herman was roommates with a guy named Todd Harriman. And so someone would call, because this is back in the day of landlines, no one had their own phone number. And someone would call the apartment and said, can I speak to Todd? Which one? Todd Herman. Which one? Well, the one from the Midwest. Which one? Well, the keyboard guy. Which one? Like they did exactly the same thing with the same name almost. And so that was great. But anyway, so he was the keyboard tech on the Stevie tour. And then he got a gig on the Michael Jackson tour and they were starting rehearsals. So he jumped off to do that. And I came in and it was a pretty short tour. It was I say short, but 3 months, I think. And it was a great tour. It was the Natural Wonder Tour. And it was mostly Europe or all Europe. And we picked up a local orchestra for every show. So we had local string players on stage. They would get rehearsed in the early afternoon and then they would do the show that night. And most of them, they were so excited. But in Italy, they got up and danced when they didn't have to play. So during Superstition, they were just going nuts.
Nice. Oh man. Yeah. Wow. That's 3 months long, and you're married, and you have your son is around.
And that was brutal. That part of it, and because you got it in 92. I mean, the internet existed, obviously, but you didn't use it for
Like
anything
that.
at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So I would have to wait until they set up a phone in production and then kind of wait in line to use it. And we would talk for, I don't know, 5 minutes every few days.
Wow.
So that was
Yeah.
really, really tough.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. That was, yeah. Tour life is a different animal, I'm sure.
Yeah, and now, I mean, the work is still as brutal, though I don't think things
Yeah.
are as heavy as they used to be in general.
Yeah.
And but yeah, I mean, now obviously you can stay in touch a lot easier, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Awesome. Hats off to you, Debbie. Doing that all the
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay,
And
so
you took care of Stevie's stuff, or was there another keyboard player, or you
No,
just
no.
took care of
Rob
him?
Arbitier is the
Mhm.
guy who took care of Stevie's stuff, and they had a wave frame and then a bunch of stuff. And Rob is one of the best musicians I've ever met, worked with. He's someone who could, by ear, play anything he had ever heard in his life. He was telling me about
Wow.
when he was taking piano lessons, and he just never would practice. So anytime the piano teacher was giving him a new piece, he'd say, "Oh, well, could you just play it for me just so I can hear how it's supposed to be?" And he would never practice. And he'd come back, and this is like Rachmaninoff. This isn't, chopsticks. And he'd come back at the next lesson and just play it, which is insane. So part of his gig, he was doing a lot of the playback stuff, and he was not musical director in terms of rehearsing the band and that kind of thing, but he was the guy who took care of Stevie's stuff and also held things together when because Stevie would just change his mind. They would do stuff out of order or the arrangement would change. But then also he was the guy when Stevie would stand up to dance or clap while he was singing, Rob would take over and play Stevie's parts, which is kind of insane.
Mhm.
So anyway, and I was taking care of one of the other two keyboard players on stage.
awesome. Yeah.
And Robin, you remain friends, like still,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Because I
absolutely.
think I've met him
Absolutely.
at your house before, right? Probably
Yeah,
parties,
yeah. I did a
things.
lot of stuff with him over the years as well, and I missed his birthday party this year, which he might be mad at me about.
Okay.
But yeah, I did a lot of stuff with Rob. He's also an uber geek like me. We nerded heavily over the years.
Nice. I was going to make a joke that, well, joining us now is Rob.
Yeah, I know. I'm expecting it.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. That would be amazing. So, okay, coming off of Stevie Wonder.
Yeah. So I
John, do
got
you
back.
want to jump to? Or yeah.
Go
Well, I
ahead.
got back to town, and Todd Herman, who had jumped ship to do rehearsals, was still in rehearsals because they rehearsed for, I don't know, 6 or 8 months before that tour started on the Michael Jackson thing. And this is the Dangerous tour. And so they were taking a synclavier on the road. So Mark Luer, who had gotten me the job, whichever one, pick a word, at New England Digital, was doing the synclav stuff on that tour. And I think they realized that they needed a tech to go as well, because he was operating during the shows, and to also be the tech, that was going to be too big of a job, because there were 2 synclaviers and 16 tracks of disc playback
Wow.
with 16 drives. So it was 4 26 space racks full of synclavier.
Wow.
So I was the tech and he was the operator for that tour. And what was great about it is I've got these 4 massive racks of electronics, and we were doing a lot of shows sort of near the equator. I'm like, well, this stuff will blow up. It's not going to work if we just take it. So I had a tent with an air conditioner. I had my own, I think it was a 2.5-ton air conditioner that was under the stage, and then this huge duct up into a tent. And so during the day, I would open the tent, and the way the steel work was, I could hang my hammock right in front of the tent, and we put beer in the duct. So I was the most popular person on tour for a while.
You know what you were doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
And
Okay,
that was on
so
and off for about a year and a half.
and this is like after 92 at this point. There's a credit that you have with Jermaine Jackson on the You Said record for synclavier assistance.
Yeah, that was right when Debbie came over, which would have been July 91. And I was working for John Barnes, and John had the gig to go to Atlanta and work with Jermaine, and Debbie had just gotten there. And I was like, I need to take this gig because I'm selfish. And so she was totally cool. I'm sure she wasn't very happy about it, but this is why I have a career, is that Debbie's cool with stuff, basically, and keeps me from dying of hunger when I'm busy. So I went to Atlanta, and the great thing about that is Barney Perkins was in one room mixing, and Dave Way was in the other room because he was deep in the Atlanta scene at that point, mixing stuff. So that's when I first met Dave Way as well.
Nice. Yeah. Also past guest on the show.
Exactly.
Okay, so where are we in the Dangerous tour? About what year is this? This is
93 and 94.
93. Yeah.
92. Oh yeah, so it started in 92 and then most of 93 as well. And it was
Yeah.
like 2 months out, 1 month back, 2 months out, 1 month back.
Yeah. Okay. For how long?
About
How long was
almost
that?
a year and a half on and
Yeah.
off. I mean, there were some longer breaks in there, but yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Well, jumping forward a little bit, 1995, History, Past, Present, and Future, book number 1 comes out. And you have engineer, programming, drum programming, sound effects, soundscapes, and clavier programming, synthesizer programming credits on all of this record.
Yeah, the credits got super specific.
They were very specific. Yeah.
And everything seems to be a year and a half, but that record was almost a year. Well, that was probably closer to a year, maybe 15 months or something like that. So we got off tour, and then he was writing with some of the people from the tour and things for a little while, and then they were going to start the record. And he booked record 1 in LA for a year. And then the Northridge quake happened. And he said, yeah, I'm not working here. So he went to Hit Factory in New York. They decided very early on, okay, but we want the synclaviers here. So it's like Andrew's the guy who knows how to set them up, and he can get them out of storage from the tour. So I was supposed to go to New York for 3 days to set up the synclavier, and I was there for the whole record. I mean, we ended up moving back to LA to finish the record, but yeah, I was there for 3 days. And finally, after about 2.5 weeks, I'm like, look, first of all, I'm out of clothes. Second of all, I got to go home and do my taxes. And third of all, my wife was thinking I was going to be home after 3 days. So I went home for, I think, about a week or something like that, and then went back to New York. And then after a while, Debbie just came to New York, and she was in the hotel with me and our incredibly energetic son in Manhattan for a long time. So, yeah.
How old was he at that point?
3.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's probably the only child to be banned from Rockefeller Center. Because he refused to not go in the fountain. He had to go in the fountain. And he was told by one of the security guards, don't come back.
Nice. There's no formal letter or anything from anybody that like
forbids no, I don't think he wasn't on a freaking list. But yeah. But they knew him.
Nice. Okay,
so he just wanted to have fun.
Yeah. Around this period, were you guys in touch? You and John and hearing the story?
Yeah, I mean, we were all sort of that group of Miami people. Like when I first moved out to LA, I lived in an apartment with Bill Johnston, who is now like head of everything post for that. But he was working at a place called EFX, which had synclaviers. They were a post sound effects house. And then I moved into a house that we had on I'm forgetting the name of this, Laurel Grove Avenue in Studio City. And lots of people lived in that house. Like it was just a revolving door, and almost all of them had gone to University of Miami at the same time. It was just a huge group of us went out at the same time with John, Rich Tonis, and also Joe Barresi went out at the same time. So yeah, there were a lot of us. Steve Toback, and it was like revolving things with who would live in what house when.
When Andrew and Debbie moved out of that Laurel Grove house, I moved into their room. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and Andy Potvin was there. Yeah, at the same time. So yeah, a ton of us were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Tanya, Andy and Tanya.
Yep.
Amazing.
Yeah, so we've circled in and out of each other's lives for a long time.
Yeah, and I don't think you were ever out for that long. You know, it certainly didn't feel like it. But
no, but this is why good friends. I don't want to get all emotional here, but
don't get teary.
No, but we've had this great relationship for all of these years, and I'm super thankful for it. You know, for you and Debbie both. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, me too. I think we were all really lucky. Like sometimes you go to schools and it's like that. Like there were a lot of great musicians when we were there, but it felt like we had missed the like holy shit era of musicians at Miami by 5 years or so. Because I mean, Jocko was there for a little bit. Will Lee's dad was still the dean of the music school. Like the list of people, Matheny was there. It was absolutely insane. And like I say, there were still great musicians when we were there, but the engineers, that was, I mean, I'm sure there've been groups since then, but that felt like peak times. Neil Avron was there at the same time. Like just so many unbelievably talented people at the same time. And we all kept in touch.
Yeah. Yeah. It's and supportive of each other in ways that, you know, that I'm always incredibly grateful for, no doubt about it. So, yeah, really cool.
Awesome.
So, so we would all kind of, you know, we'd all be really busy, and then we'd all reconvene for like a Thanksgiving or some party and at somebody's house, and you know, we'd all catch up. And
picture of Jake in a stroller with one of those big oil can things of Guinness. Was it Guinness? No.
Foster's, right?
Foster's, yeah, big can of Foster's. I mean, it wasn't open, but he was chewing on the rim or something like that. And that was at Joe Barresi's place when he and Toback were there. And that was the apartment that got condemned during the Northridge quake.
Northridge quake, yeah, that changed a lot of things for a lot of people. That earthquake, and it's what enabled. Well, it's not what enabled you, but you ended up buying the house you all lived in for a really long time, right? After the Northridge quake.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And strangely bought it from Grover Jackson, who had a synclavier, but he's the Jackson of Jackson Charvel guitars. And I'd met him years before. Really, really funny guy, really nice guy. And we saw the house randomly. I saw an ad in the paper, and when we went to look at it, I opened up a kitchen cupboard and there was this piece of paper that said Grover and a phone number. And I thought, man, there's a Muppet and there's Grover Jackson. Nobody else is named Grover. And it turned out to be Grover Jackson.
But this place for you, I mean, this is where your studio ended up. This is where everything coalesced around.
Absolutely. He had done all the heavy lifting to turn the garage into a studio. He'd put in AC, he'd put in clean power, put a floor down, and then moved because he got a gig. I think it was in Nashville. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, then he left. And so that was my studio for years. Yeah. Well, we were in that house for 22 years.
Amazing. Wow. Yep. The orange trees, the avocado trees.
Yeah. A gigantic avocado tree that was over the studio. And when they started to get ripe, and they weren't good eating ones. They weren't Haas. There was some other thing, but the squirrels would start getting to them, and they would just eat around the stem, and they would drop like hand grenades onto the roof. It was really loud.
Good for doing vocals.
Yeah. Well, the dogs next door are actually on a lot of records. They're on a lot of records.
Man.
All right. Well, go ahead, John. You were going to say something.
Oh, no, I was going to say, so after then the Jackson tour was over, or the record was over, sorry, in New York, then you go back to LA. Now you had spent time with Bruce And
Yeah.
Eddie Delana was on that record too, right?
Yeah, Bruce Swedian. That's where I met Eddie Delana.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Steve Porcaro came out for a while, and it was just the two of us in a room doing keyboard overdubs.
Wow.
It was great. We just kind of did whatever Steve wanted to do, and then we'd bring the tape down the street because we were in the old building,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd put it up and just transfer everything and give us another song, and we'd just disappear and do that.
How cool.
So yeah, a ton of people. That's also when I met Michael Boddicker for the first time. Yeah, David Foster came. Yeah, it was kind of insane.
Yeah.
Trevor
Quincy
Rabin
the
came and
whole
played some
time.
guitar. Slash came in to play some stuff. One of the funniest riders ever in the history of my career, anyway. So he was coming, and we called up to talk to his guitar tech because they were on tour, something like that. And he was just coming in for a few days. We said, okay, so what do you need? And the guy said, well, okay, we need some Jack Daniels. We're going to need some vodka, a lot of cranberry juice. Make sure there's lots of ice and a tuner. Like, okay. And that was it.
There's a story about Slash getting on stage someplace like with Les Paul or something, and all these heavyweight guitar players, and then he was asking for a tuner on stage, and everybody just kind of looked at him apparently and was like, really?
Yeah, but I mean, I think he kind of created the myth at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
but he's such a badass guitar player, and
He's got a
real
great sound.
student of it. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people sort of write him off as like, oh, he's lucky and can play a couple solos, but no,
He's got a sound.
He's a deep player. Yeah.
No. So that's a year or 15 months of your life, and then you head back to LA after that, and so you're back with Debbie, and now Xanthi at this point. Is Xanthi around?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Xanthi happened. So we finished the record finally, and we'd been working in LA at that point for at least 4 or 5 months when we finished. And Xanthi was born on the day that everybody who worked on the record went up to Neverland and like hung out for the day in the amusement park. But they were really cool about it. I mean, I called. Did I call, or did Brad Sundberg call? How did I get in touch with him? I somehow talked to one of the guys from the record to say like, oh, Xanthi's born, whatever. And this huge basket showed up from MJJ Productions with all kinds of stuff in it, which was amazing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you were an integral part, it sounds like, of, what was going on. You made stuff happen, which is what you do.
Yeah. I'd been there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's why there's so many weird credits, because that was it. Like, Bruce is obviously in the room with Michael and the main writers who would come in. And then Eddie was working mostly with Brad, who had been the MD on the tour. So he was the sort of second engineer, not second as an assistant. Like, he was running room number 2. And I was just all over the place. When they needed something else, I'd be the guy to do that.
What was Bruce like?
He was awesome, man. I mean, his big booming voice, and we got along really well, but he loved pulling pranks and stuff like that. So we were in, it was studio, I don't remember, one of the downstairs rooms at Hit Factory in New York. And it was big, really big room. And the synclavier, for some reason, we'd set it up in front of the console. The tower was there, but then the keyboard was in the back of the room. So whenever anything, like I needed to change discs for sounds or reboot the thing, I'd have to walk around in front of the console, and Bruce would be working, and he would work loud. And every single time I got in front of the console, he would switch to the mains, and it would be so fucking loud. And he would just start laughing. Andrew, he loved it. He absolutely loved it. But, watching him work, there would be things that like didn't really make sense. Like, he would record a choir, and he would have 2 Omni microphones set up sort of like a Blumline thing, but they were an Omni.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the best stereo recording, and it was wide, but obviously completely coherent. But I think because diaphragms have a side, even if they're an Omni, like the sound was different enough. He recorded everything in stereo. absolutely everything was recorded in stereo to
Mm-hmm.
analog tape, and we were using 3348s at that point, and then he would transfer. And he was another one of those guys where the mixes were so clean and you have no idea how he did it. It was, another Al Schmidt kind of mixer where there's just so much space and the
Mm-hmm.
mixes were huge,
Yeah.
absolutely huge. But he listened so loud that Tannoy had sent over some speakers for us to check out as mains, because one of the rooms, the mains he didn't like. And he literally knocked the cap off the middle of one of the woofers, and the tweeter caught on fire at exactly the same time. And he's like, well, I don't know. They can't really take the level.
See, I would not have imagined him being a loud mixer, but I
It would
guess.
work quiet too, but
Mhm.
also Michael loved it super, super loud.
Yeah.
Really, really loud. And so I think he got used to it. And I mean, really, the only time he worked loud was when I was walking in front of the console. But but I think he got used to it. If Michael was in the room, so he wanted to make sure that it was going to feel the way he knew Michael wanted it.
Makes
And
sense.
I also love that his nickname for I don't remember. Oh no, I do remember now. He always called Michael Smelly, because Michael at one point, Michael never cursed,
Mhm.
but he would really get into stuff. And at one point, I think it was on a Thriller, he said to him, like, "Man, that's smelly," and that was it. So Bruce just called him Smelly from then on.
Amazing. Did so you had 2 or 3 different rooms going at that point, so you would see them, then you wouldn't, and
Yeah,
yeah.
we had the 2 rooms downstairs at Hit Factory booked all the time. Then for about 3 months, I was in the old building in the Neve room doing stuff like with Steve Vaccaro or whatever.
Mhm.
But then there was a day when we had all 4 rooms at Hit Factory. So the 2 rooms downstairs were the ones we just always had. Then the Neve room halfway up was where we had Slash, and we were doing an orchestra date in Studio One, which was all the way at the top. And I still had the studio down the street. And then the same thing happened once we got back to LA. When we were finishing up, we had 2 rooms at Larrabee and 2 rooms at Record One, and there was something else going on somewhere else.
Man,
A lot of
that
stuff.
is a lot of stuff. Wow.
Yeah.
So 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 that finishes. Xanthi's born. You have the studio in the backyard.
Yeah.
And then what happens next in the trajectory?
I mean, I had the studio for a while, and I think that's when I started doing a lot more stuff for Carmen, because I was back in town. And I had sort of stopped working for John Barnes to go on tour. So then when I got back, he still had some stuff for me as well, which was great. So they were probably my 2 main clients. But then that's right about when Pro Tools happened, because during the Michael Jackson record, when I was in New York, I went to the Digidesign office and they showed me TDM. That it was like just coming out, the actual
Wow.
mixing, because the Synclavier disc recording was a tape machine, but it was on disc, so you could do the editing. Like there's what's the song? There's a song on History where Michael's holding out this note forever, and he could hold a note forever, but not that forever. So
Mhm.
that is a direct to disc edit that took me like a full day to get it seamless.
Wow.
So I was doing stuff like that, but there was no mixing at all. And so when I saw TDM, it was like, oh shit, this is going to be the thing. And then they sent me over a system to try, and it crashed, and then it wouldn't boot anymore. So like that was it for Pro Tools for a while. But when I got back to LA and finished that record, that's when I started getting into Pro Tools, and then I became a vocal tuning guy. So I would show up at a studio with my DA88s, transfer whatever I needed, rough mix, and then all the vocals, go home, tune them, put them back on D88, bring them back to the studio, lock them back up, and transfer them. So there was a lot of that. Just whatever I could get. I mean, still hustling like crazy, I
Yeah.
mean, the Michael Jackson record was great, but it was sort of it was one of like 5 credits I had. So it wasn't like I had this career that was just rolling now.
Mhm.
So I was doing a little bit of everything. And like you came over at one point when I'd first set up the studio, and like my speakers were on road cases and they were different heights. And you're like, dude, you cannot listen like that. So I like
Remember
figured
that.
out that I had enough money to go to Guitar Center and buy speaker stands. Like that was going to be the thing. I was going to spend some money on speaker stands. And then eventually built a wall in there so I had a drum room and put down some carpet, because it was a bit of it was very unfinished. Like the structure was good. All the really heavy lifting stuff was done, but it wasn't a studio. And then I think I did it because Wendy and Lisa were going to come in and do some scoring. So this is, I mean, it's got to be a year or two after the Michael Jackson record, though, right?
Xanthi was about 2 or 3.
Yeah, Xanthi was 2 or 3 when they started working there.
And how did you meet Wendy and Lisa? Through Carmen?
Through Carmen. Yeah, absolutely. I met them while they were doing the Eroica record, which was with Susan and Susan Rogers. And it's just, it's a fantastic record. It's so good. And for people who don't know, Wendy and Lisa, Prince and the Revolution, they were the guitar and keyboard players in that band, and just so talented. I mean, Wendy's one of the best drummers I've ever worked with, and a ridiculous bass player. And Lisa is one of the most intuitive musicians.
She's incredible. They both are.
And she, like, we had been doing some scoring because they came over to work with me because, again, I was the guy who could figure stuff out, and they were just starting to score a TV show and do their first film. And they had never done that before. And somehow they knew that I was the geek and like that was going to work. And we hit it off pretty well. So they came over to do that. And I just lost my thread of what I was going to say about that. But anyway.
Oh, okay. Wendy and Lisa, first time over.
Yeah. Something
All right.
like that.
Gotcha. All right.
But actually, I'd worked with them a little bit before that because they were working on a song. And they needed to record an overdub or something, and Carmen was busy. And so they came over, and Sheila E. was going to play the snare drum. Like, for some reason, I don't know why. I think they just wanted her to play. And we had the weirdest game of horse in the driveway because I had taken the basketball hoop that we had bought during the Michael Jackson record to put at Larrabee because we were bored and we needed a basketball hoop. So that was at the house. And so Wendy and Lisa and Sheila and me were playing horse. And most games of horse, like you go under the tree and you take a shot. Like, all right, you do that. But they were just doing anything to embarrass me, basically. Like, okay, you start from here and then you do a little dance and then you hold your hip and you spin around and then you shoot. And I was definitely the first one out.
But that started a very long and successful relationship with them.
I think it was about 5 years, wasn't it? Yeah. So 5 years, all of the scoring work they did was done out of the garage. That was, in the studio. And we did a bunch of films, got to meet a lot of people doing that too. Like Hans Zimmer lent them a bunch of S760 samplers at one point because he had built up this gigantic orchestral library. And we were starting on a film that was going to be more orchestral. Oh, but the one of the reasons I was going to say it was because with Lisa, a lot of the cues we would do, she would just say, okay, show me the scene. All right, let me see that again. And then she'd just start playing and she'd play again. And it would either be a string patch or a piano patch or something like that. And then she would play one like, oh, that's the cue. And so then they'd leave and I would have to make a click track to whatever she had played. And this is when we were recording all the MIDI in Studio Vision and the audio in Pro Tools. You're running both on the same, I mean, all that kind of stuff. So I would have to freeform this click because we were going to be doing strings. And so obviously you have to have a click to be able to do the charts. And then at one point we were at, I think at A&M, like recording something. And she said, oh, well, I'll play B3 on this. And she was one of the best B3 players I'd ever heard. Like, and she said, I've spent months just playing B3. And she was making it do stuff I'd never heard before, like doing really short, like octaves with the percussion on and then cranking the reverb afterwards. So it had this amazing pre-delay on the spring reverb and just absolutely insane how good they are.
Yeah. Yep. And great people to hang with on top of it,
Yeah,
and yeah, really,
really,
really.
really funny. And
Hmm.
just because it was sort of family, like Lisa actually had one of the best lines ever. At one point, just out of nowhere, she said, "I think I'm going to be an astronaut." You're like, "What? What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, I spend a lot of time in space." And I think she'd thought of the joke and was just sort of waiting for the right time to say it. And then at one point, Wendy's twin Susanna had a baby, India, and the how old was India when they dropped? I mean, like 6 weeks old or something like that. Super, super young. But Susanna had not had a day out by herself. And she's like, "Look, I'm dropping the baby off." And so we all took turns holding India while working. And she was just a furnace, and it was so hot. And I remember you would hold her until you were sweating so much you couldn't hold her anymore, and then you'd pass her over. And I still have a Polaroid of her in the studio from that day. So yeah, it
How
was
cool.
really, really great times with them. It was awesome.
Yeah. And so yeah, a lot of films and some records with them too, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Or
bits and pieces.
hmm was a film called Juana Man in there?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
There's Juana Man.
Because I think I worked on that a little bit with them,
Yeah, you
like
recorded a bunch of drum
some
stuff
drums
for
or
that.
something, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you did a
Yeah.
session with them and made a bunch
Mhm.
of recorded a bunch of beats, and then we would loop stuff from that CD, which was
Got you.
awesome. So that got used all over the place. There was, oh, I can't remember. It was one of the first movies with Nia Long in it.
Hmm.
Um, oh, I can't remember what it's called, but that was one that I played trumpet on because they
Because you
love
could.
to just sort of leave, and I would have a task, and usually it was like making the click track or bouncing a rough mix of something. But there was one where I'm like, oh, it might be cool to have some like crazy jazz trumpet going on there. And so from what I might be wrong, but I think Wendy played upright bass and then split, and then I just did a bunch of trumpet on. And unfortunately, that cue didn't make it because they cut the scene,
Ah,
you know. But yeah, it was really eclectic what we did because we did stuff in every style,
yeah.
from pure orchestral scoring to full band stuff. Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, they could cover it all.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So from Wendy and Lisa, so how did you then start ending up more record oriented? Because you could have definitely gone off and done more film and TV. You were making connections in that world, and you probably could have continued down that, but you got pulled back to records.
Well, I could have, except that we did it really differently from how everybody else did it because we did it like record makers do it. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
you need some music there? We will do exactly the music you need. Oh, you've re-edited? All right, we will change our cue to fit. And on one of the movies, I can't remember which one, but Mark Vodakevich came in. He's a great music editor, still
Mm-hmm.
working on lots of films. And he's like, okay, so they've said that I'll come set up and be your music editor now. And so he set up his rig in the little guest room right next to the studio. And we just never gave him anything to do.
Hmm.
So, I mean, he was compiling stuff and getting it ready to send to the mixers, but like he was used to being given a cue and then he would edit as they changed film. We're like, no, 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 because now we gotta do this and whatever. So we never really fit the mold of that. But that was just like with the Synclavier job. I actually said, I'm not making records and I need to make records. And I
Mm-hmm.
told them I needed to make records. And I think, it hadn't run its course at all. I mean, we still got along great, but I think that it was just time. And that's when they got their own room. I think they went straight from there to A&M. They might have had a room in between, but I can't remember. And Richard Davis
Mm-hmm.
started working with them,
Mm-hmm.
which was really good because he's super talented in totally different ways than me.
Yep.
Um, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I just decided I mean, I was still doing sessions in between.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like we were full time, but when we were on a film, I really couldn't do anything else. And
Right.
I just decided I needed to make records.
Mm-hmm.
So
And then And is that when you'd met Rick Rubin then, close to this time, or was that a little bit farther down? Sorry,
I
I
think it
didn't
was
do
further down.
the research Mark did.
It's
Sorry.
fine. And I was thinking as we're talking about this, like I don't remember at all what order stuff came. Like Mark will know just from All
Mhm.
Music, which is inaccurate, but it's somewhat right. Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. I think Rick was after that because I was already back doing records when there was a possibility I was going to work on One Hot Minute, and
Mhm.
then that didn't happen. Someone else got the gig. I think it was working on the vocals,
Mhm.
and then yeah. So I'm pretty sure it was a few years later. I mean, I'm looking at Debbie, but I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
Sort of.
You did some stuff with Eddie Elena.
Yeah, I mean, Eddie Delana pulled me in on some records and things like
Mhm.
that, and I think I sort of went back to Pro Tools and programming, but also engineering. No, so all the Don Was stuff was before, and Rob Cavallo. So I worked on a
Mhm.
bunch of records with them, starting with editing, and then moving on to do other stuff
ya.
with those guys. And then Rick was after that.
Got ya. Okay.
I'm curious about what year was Rick?
Well, the first record I ever worked on was Amethyst Rockstar, which was Saul Williams. That was like I'd gotten called a couple of times. Once, like the One Hot Minute thing, it just didn't work out. And then there were a couple other gigs where I got called because Dave Schiffman was engineering for him a lot. And I knew a couple of the other engineers. And so he would always put me up for stuff. And there were a couple of times when the schedule just didn't work out. So the Saul Williams record was the first one that worked. And it was another one of these things where I knew how to sync stuff up. They'd done all the basic tracks on an MPC 60 and then just dumped them to tape stereo and then done the rest of the record. And now they wanted to split stuff up and they couldn't get the MPC to sync up. And all right, so I will come and do that. And then at the end of the first or second day, Rick said, yeah, we're going to track some drums tomorrow. I'm like, well, okay, I'm set up in the vocal booth doing this thing because I'm not going to remember his name, and he's such a nice guy and such a great engineer. The guy who was mixing the Saul Williams record. You could look it up, Mark. I'm sure. He also mixed the D'Angelo stuff. I mean, just an insane engineer.
Russell Elevato?
Russell Elevato, yes. So he was set up in the control room. This was at Conway in the back in the SSL room. And so I was set up in a vocal booth, and he's set up in the control room, and we're not going to book another studio. And like, well, all that's left is the live room. So I guess I'm going to bring all my stuff tomorrow and we're going to track drums. And it was Chad Smith. And it was on a
about security
it was
Armin.
Get Vivid.
No, what?
Click to learn.
What?
you got an ad playing. What's going on there?
Just act like everything's fine.
Okay. But you're cutting me off. Like, that's it. All right, thanks, guys.
Yeah, exactly. That was the ad. The end of the
So
speech.
I set up in the live room and tracked Chad Smith like 3 feet away from me. And I was going to say, it was a record of Wu-Tang Clan covers. And so he was playing on, I can't remember which one he was playing on, but there was another one that System of a Down had done. And so we were getting ready we were sort of finishing up the drums, and Rick said, oh, and Serge is coming to do some vocals. Like, what? And there's like 2-inch tapes, and I have no idea what's going on. And so I get the track sheet out, and I find the thing, like record Serge. And he's like, okay, cool. So tomorrow we're going to be doing a remix one with Tom Morello. And so if you could just program up some stuff, we're thinking like it should have We Will Rock You sort of feel to it, but if you could just have some other stuff. So I went home and I programmed up a ton of stuff and then brought the rest of my stuff for that. And it was just, and it wasn't like Rick was testing me at all, but it was like, that's what needed to get done. And to me, that sounds crazy that you would ask somebody you barely know, like, oh, by the way, we're going to do this tomorrow. And if it hadn't worked out, then that would have been that. But I just like, I have to make this happen. So yeah, that was all in 2 days, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, nuts. So that's when I met Tom. It's when I met Chad. It's when I met Serge. Yeah, and Rick.
Yeah.
All in the same 2 days.
Yeah.
Funny how this stuff works, right?
Pretty big moment.
Crazy.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So we're kind of around 2000-ish at this point.
I don't. You tell me.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
terrible.
all music needs some work because Saul Williams isn't on here.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Um, okay. So I'm trying to find out when mixing work started for you.
Well,
Obviously you're always doing some, but
yeah, I was doing some. Like I had mixed. Well, when I was doing some editing for Don Was. Like he brought me in. Yeah, I don't think it was the first time I'd worked for him, but I came in on the Stones record, Bridges to Babylon, and Ed Cherney was tracking that record, and watching him track that band, it was insane. They were at Ocean Way, and they were using two 24-track machines just overlapping, and he had 14-inch reels of tape. So you'd get, what, half an hour on those?
At 30?
30?
Yeah, it sounds about right. Mm-hmm.
I think half an hour at 30, and they may have even been going at 15, because the band was just play all day. And he only had 24 tracks, and he knew he had to leave 2 because he had to have time code on 24, and he had to have a track in between because otherwise it would bleed. And so he had 22 tracks, and it was the whole band, plus Bernard Fowler was there singing, and I think somebody else was singing. And they had, oh, come on, names flying out of my head. One of the coolest drummers like ever. Not Jay Belrose, the other guy, older guy, crankier guy, but just an amazing
Keltner?
groove. Yeah, Keltner. So Jim Keltner was Charlie's clique. So they'd get into a song and Jim would play something, and then Charlie would play along with that, and that was the band. So the two drummers, and Ed's just tracking. And then like Mick would get up because he was at the piano singing, and then he wandered over to the Rhodes, and he wouldn't say like, oh, I'm going to go play Rhodes now. And then, but Ed would just be at the patch bay or have someone at the patch bay done, and then they'd switch tape machines, and like it was nothing. And I was nervous just watching it happen. It was insane. But so what it meant was the songs would just sort of evolve. And then Don would be taking notes as it went. Or sometimes like he'd get a DAT and there'd be an hour and a half of a song, and he'd map it out, and then he'd just circle stuff. And he was on tour because Was Not Was had just put out a record. So he couldn't even be there. So he was faxing me pictures of like hotel notepad stuff with these maps of songs. And I would then load the tapes into Pro Tools and do the edits, and so that they could figure out like, okay, that's going to work, that's not going to work. And then they went back and cut the tape. But I think some of it, I ended up just dumping those edits back onto the tape because it would have been impossible to put the stuff together.
So as a guide for what they ended up recutting.
No, those were the songs.
Oh,
yeah.
So just the stereo.
Sometimes they recut them.
But it was
I was
Ed's...
editing the multi-track. I was editing 24 tracks, which on Pro Tools at that time was really brutal. Like you had to work in black and white mode because the graphics cards couldn't keep up. It was definitely pushing what Pro Tools could do. But no, I was cutting multi-track stuff at that point. Wow. And there were tons of times when I had to line up when it went from reel to reel, find the kick drum, and it would take forever to zoom in. And then it would turn out you had the wrong kick drum. And like, yeah, that was amazing.
Mm-hmm. Do you miss those days?
I mean, in a way, yeah, because like, look, there were so many things that were like ridiculously cool. I was doing a Michael Jackson session in LA. This was afterwards. We were getting ready to do a show in Brunei, as you do. And we're doing lots of pre-production. And I was at Enterprise, and I got a call from Stevie Wonder asking me a question about some keyboard. Like, I'm in the studio with Michael Jackson. I just got a call from Stevie Wonder. And then there was a day that I was working on the Stones record, and then Carmen had been working with Robbie Robertson, and I had to go work with Robbie that night. Mm-hmm. So like, it was insane. And there was something about going to studios and the whole group and things like that. But I don't miss like technology not being able to keep up with what we wanted to do with it.
Yeah.
you know?
And in so many situations, you were the guy who had to make it work, and people were looking at you for that. And this is at the time where things are pretty clunky.
Yeah, yeah. And, as always, I kind of made sure that I was the guy who knew how to do that because I have this very unhealthy drive to try and be the best at something because I feel really inadequate all the time. So it's like, all right, I need to be the guy who can do this and no one else can do it. And, and that's how I ended up working on the first Doyle Bramhall record, which was one of the first times I worked with Wendy and Lisa, actually, because they were producing that. And we needed to edit some drums. And I was like the guy who could just show up with a Pro Tools rig, transfer the stuff, have it be in sync when we put it back. And I don't remember even why we were doing it because the drums on that record were amazing anyway. But there was one song where they really wanted the feel to be a certain way. And so we were doing that. And multi-track editing at that point was not really a thing.
Yikes. Yeah. And you would,
Yeah.
I mean, this is back when you would make a cut and you would have to wait for the loading bar to hear it back and then recut things. And
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
we're
it was a
complaining
very
about ARA
slow.
data today. And
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
Very
Crazy.
slow process.
Okay. Well, Robbie Robertson was around 1998. So just getting kind of my grips on timeline here.
Which will help me because I don't remember.
So you have you start having some mixing. This is the all music thing happening.
Yeah.
Here. So you have some mixing credits start popping up around 98. Naked with You, Taylor Dane, Pure Sugar. I'm not familiar with these records.
Well, those came because of a guy named Jez Collin. Actually, he was a great programmer. He'd come out of the drum and bass scene in England, and then I can't remember exactly how we met. It was through somebody, somebody, and we met. And he did a lot of remixes, and then he brought me in on some records to mix. And so that's what Pure Sugar definitely was. I'm pretty sure Taylor Dane was with him as well. But those were a little bit, under the radar stuff. I mean, Taylor Dane was actually pretty big, but this was after she was really big. So the first mix that was like a big deal, I think, was 99 Problems. And I don't remember what year that was.
Yeah.
And to be fair, and I think that Rich Costey mixed the Wu-Tang tribute record. I think that Rick at that point thought that I had mixed that. And that's why he asked me to mix 99 Problems. And that's actually a bizarre story too. So I'd done a record, Dave Schiffman brought me in to do a record with Alien Ant Farm. And it was being produced by the DeLeo brothers from Stone Temple Pilots. So Robert and Dean DeLeo, who are two of the funniest people I have ever met. They're just absolutely insane. And such good musicians. I mean, nobody knows more about, it might be a tie with Joe Barresi, like about what guitar with what pick and what amp is going to sound like what. Like just unbelievable knowledge of that stuff. And Robert, I mean, they both are, but Robert has got this just innate musical sense for background vocals and stuff. I mean, he's an amazing bass player. So we worked on that, and then there was going to be a writing session with Pink that the DeLeos were doing, and this is months after that record. And so Dave Schiffman was going to engineer, and I was going to be there to do extra shit, which is what I do. And we were at the studio, and I got a call from Lindsay Chase, who is Rick's sort of coordinator for all this stuff, and she said, "Oh, hey, can you come mix something today?" I'm like, "I'd love to, but I'm on a session." And I would never, and I have to thank my mom for this. I would never bail on something I'd committed to do something else, even if I thought it would be a million times better, either just more fun or for me or whatever. So I'm like, look, I got a session. I can't do it. And then about an hour and a half later, after we're just sitting around at the studio doing nothing, we get a call from Pink's management. Oh, she's not going to be able to make it. So I immediately got back on the phone with Lindsay and like, okay, I'll come. What is it? Oh, it's a Jay-Z track. Like, okay. And so I showed up at Rick's house and we mixed it on his 8068 with no automation, almost no outboard gear. Basically, we had two 1176s that worked at that point, and I rented a Fatso because someone said it was really cool. It might even have been John that said it was really cool.
Sounds right.
It might have been you.
Yeah.
You just used it at Sound Factory on something. I
Mhm.
don't know. So I rented that and mixed it, and we weren't even done recording. Like, we didn't have all of Jay's vocals, and all the scratching went on almost last. We hadn't tracked any of the percussion, and the 808 stuff went on. But that mix just happened.
Mm.
Like, the faders went up, and I wasn't doing much because there was no gear. And that was still, I was young as an engineer, and the younger you are as an engineer, the more you do. Like, I got to use everything in the room, and I'm going to do stuff. And like, there was stuff you just couldn't do because, oh, well, that EQ doesn't work. All right, well, I'll swap one in from another channel, but I can't EQ that channel. That's cool.
Mm.
And like, okay, I'm definitely going to want an 1176 on Jay's vocal. So what am I going to do with the other one? You know, that kind of thing. And I bounced the stuff with the Fatso because for some reason the Fatso's actually got a pretty big delay on it, and everything was phasey. So like, all right, I'll track that. And that was kind of my first big parallel compression thing, because then I was muting it and bringing it back in, which I wouldn't have done if it was on the console, because I would have had to do that move manually all the time. So it got to the point where, unless Rick was down there to do an overdub, like the scratching, or we had a new vocal from Jay and he had to listen, I stopped listening through the speakers on the console, and I would only listen through the ATR 102 speaker, which is a great way to check your mixes. But I was just terrified of fucking it up because it was just exploding out of the speakers. I'm like, all right, don't touch it. Don't touch it. And like, the very first night Rick came down and he's like, yeah, it sounds really good. And then he was messing with some stuff, and I'm taking notes surreptitiously, because then the next morning we're having a listen. He's like, man, I don't know about some of that stuff. And I just backed out of some of it. Not like I'm so great, and he wasn't, but it's just one of those things
Mhm.
that mix just happened. And then it didn't seem to matter what we did with overdubs. Like, you could put anything on it and it was absolutely fine. And it never changed.
You've talked about that mix in some other interviews, and I was studying that one, prepping for this, and the fact that there's no automation on Jay-Z's vocal throughout the thing, listening to it, I actually had to go back to the intro, because I was like, how is it possible that the intro was as loud and clear as it was, and then everything else gets added on top of this, and it's still parked at the same fader position? So it was like going back and forth with it, but it works and it doesn't move.
I might have ridden the vocal a little bit, but like, yeah, the only sort of thing I did on the vocal was on the bit of the song where he's getting pulled over by the cop. I put that out of a different output and filtered it with the filter on the board. Now, to be fair, I mean, those tracks were in Pro Tools, but I mean, it was way before clip gain, and I don't think I was automating. I don't think I automated anything.
Yeah.
Like, I ended up having to edit the 808, because 808s are notoriously like inconsistent, especially with the kick sound. And everybody thinks that's really, really cool until you actually start mixing the song, and it's not cool because some of the kicks are really small, and that's not what you want out of an 808 kick. So I was editing that. So there was like brute force editing, but there's no automation unless I wrote something. But I don't think I wanted to. Like, I'd marked all the faders.
Yeah.
But I don't think I had to. Like, there's nothing on that mix. So it was all about balance. Like, that's as close to like Al Schmidt mixing a hip hop track as you'll ever get. It was like that.
It's so huge. It's so huge, and it's so there's no mud in it. It's like clear, it's huge. There's a reason that mix is widely talked about on the internet.
But it's also it's the arrangement. I mean, it's the samples that are on there, and it's the arrangement. And I mean, Jay's ridiculous on it. Though I remember Rick never liked the lyric of "I'll pop you like a grape in a food fight." Like, but I think when we got to the end, and Jay says something like, I can't remember exactly what he says, but like, "You're crazy for this, Rick," and he's like, "Oh yeah, this is a hit." And then he was in the video too, which was pretty badass, with that gigantic fur coat and the hat, and then just riding around the car. So.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, so Rick said this is a hit. Did you feel the energy of that from the very beginning of it? Because you said it felt great early on. And
yeah, I mean, I knew that the mix felt great and the groove was amazing. But I don't ever know it's a hit because I've got really weird taste. So the things that I love are not hits. Even when I'm working on records that end up doing really well, and I say, "Oh, that's the one that people are going to love." Like it's never even a single, never comes out on its own. And I don't know, maybe people love it, but
Yeah.
I'm just wrong all
Yeah.
the time.
Well, your musical intuition is great.
Well.
You talked as well in that specific interview about printing when you have that emotional reaction. Not to go too into the weeds on mixing stuff, but would you mind elaborating on that a little bit?
Well, it's a little less important now because you can do a save as, and that's your mix, at that moment. But there'll be times when you're building up a mix and you're working on the balance and you haven't really done a whole lot. And like the transition to the bridge will make the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. And like, oh, that's great. And I would always print a piece of that immediately. And if I was mixing the half inch, like there'd be a bit of half inch that I had, because then you work on the mix and you work on the mix and you get all the stuff that wasn't happening then. But then you got to go back and listen to that little piece. And if it's not as good, you're screwed and you got to figure out why. And so that's what I would mean. Like you get these little snapshots where something was really, really working, even though you didn't think the mix was even close. And sometimes it would make you kind of back up to that, which was much harder when we were working on boards with no automation and no recall and stuff like that. You sort of have to remember where you were at. But yeah, it's like referencing the rough now, because rough mixes, certainly back then, rough mixes are super rough mixes are mixes now. They're not rough mixes. But back then, you'd put the reel up, you'd get a balance, and then you'd print that to the second tape because you needed to do overdubs, you needed tracks, or someone wanted a DAT to take home or a cassette. And there'd be something amazing about those mixes most of the time. Like that was one of the things I always felt I was really good at. Like the quick stereo mixes on the vocal tape were always really good. And I could never recreate it, ever.
Yeah.
So capturing that and knowing what it was, because obviously the whole point is how you feel about it, not what it sounds like. And so I would always make sure to keep that.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so we have hit 99 problems. This is a point in the interview, right? This is one of the sign points for me. It's a signpost. Signpost. I would like to do the following. So we have a couple more guests that are in our green room right now, and I want to bring them up, and I want to take a break from like quick, going through like the chronological order to rest your brain for a second. And before I bring in our guests in the green room, I have a very special video that was sent in.
Oh, no.
So I'm going to play that. John, I'm going to put you in the green room here. Welcome to
You got it.
Here. Okay. Let's
see.
And
see, this is when I get frightened. When things change, I get frightened.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Am I going to be able to hear the video? That's the question.
You're going to be able to hear it. Should everything work well. Okay. So here we go. This is a video from a very special guest that sent this in. It's a serious question, Andrew. Put your serious hat on.
Hi, Andrew. Steve Lillywhite here. I'm sorry I can't be live to ask you a very important question, but given the time difference, I will be sleeping when all this happens. But I do have a very, very serious question to ask you. What is the most unusual thing you have ever found in your beard? There you go. That's my question. I hope you have a great time with the tables turned, and I really loved our talks. It was so much fun. God bless you. Keep well. Bye-bye.
Mr. Steve Lillywhite.
Yes. He is the Al Haig of Andrew Talks to Awesome People, because I had to go deal with a cat, and he's like, I'm in charge.
He took over the show and was running around.
The weirdest thing I ever found in my beard. I don't know that I've really found anything that weird, but I will tell you that was a theme during the first Audio Slave record, is Tom Morello would talk about what he thought he might find in Rick's beard. And it was usually something kind of weird. So I don't know how to answer that for me. I can't remember finding weird stuff in there. My chin.
Your
probably.
chin is the weirdest
Yeah,
thing. That's why you
it's
have the
pretty
beard.
weird. That's
Yeah.
why I have a beard, because
Right.
my chin's kind of weird.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. I don't think there's any good internet pictures of your chin. Pretty sure you have the beard in
No,
there.
there are lots of pictures before I
Yeah.
decided to stop shaving because I'm so lazy.
Yes. Okay. So all right. So I have two guests in the green room. We're gonna jump timeline a little bit to accommodate some people here. First up, I have well, I'll just bring him on because he needs no introduction. So here he goes. Which now both the guests in the green room are like, "Is it me? Is it me? Should I be ready?" All right, the one and only Mr. Fab Dupont.
What's up, guys?
Hello,
How you
Thanks
guys
for
doing?
joining here, Fab.
good. How are you doing?
Uh, Great. This is definitely one of those months. We're in construction at Flux, so it's a mess.
Perfect.
And I don't have a room, which is why I'm calling you from a phone from the dangerous couch because that's the only room in the building that doesn't have a session this moment.
Well,
A session
congratulations.
or a contractor or whatever. So anyway, but apart from that, life is good. I could show you the construction site. It's epic. Um,
Sure.
my room looks like no, you
No,
don't want to see that. But voila. But that doesn't matter. The question is, how are you doing, Andrew
I'm
Scheps?
good. Now, I would like to tell a little story, if I may.
Hit it.
I
Go
was
ahead.
surprised to see you when Mark just brought you on, but the most surprised I have ever been to see you was I was having my 50th birthday party,
Mm-hmm.
and Guillaume, your partner who lives in France, was going to
Mm-hmm.
come over with his lovely partner Julie,
Mm-hmm.
and he started driving from, and he's somebody who gets lost all the time. Like there's other stuff going on. So there were some
Yes.
texts back and forth, and I was actually thinking, like, how is he texting while he's driving? Because this is not right. And they finally got to my house, and then crawling out of the back seat, Mr. Fab Dupont, who had come from New
Yes.
York for my birthday, and I had no idea he was coming.
That was fun. That was
That was great.
fun.
And it was an
To
epic party.
Totally worth the round trip. And yes, that pub was. I have really fond memories of that pub, even though I don't drink beer. Um, but nobody's perfect. But it was that was an amazing party.
Yeah.
It's really great. Love that place. Love the hang. Have to do
Nice.
it again. When's your 60th?
It's coming. It's
Okay.
coming.
Um, so I have a couple questions.
All right.
Um, just because, I mean, nothing we haven't discussed before, but since, this is televised and all. Um, I have a Rick Rubin question,
All right.
which you feel free to not. I put it in my newsletter recently because, I write this newsletter every week, and so I'm, taking in a lot of information to make sure that the information that I pass through is relevant or at least interesting. And it is unfathomable the amount of Rick Rubin content there is on the internet. It's just mind-boggling.
And
You
it's all
can't
recent.
read.
It's all recent.
Yeah,
It's like the last 3 or 4 years, he's just decided he's going to be out there. It's amazing.
yeah. So he's definitely out there. He's in there. He's out there. He's on the side of there. He's there. He's there. Um, and so of course ubiquity prompts curiosity, at least for me. And so I went and looked up a little bit because everybody knows who Rick Rubin is, thanks to yeah. But I really never dug deep into the discography and stuff like that. I paid attention. I know you worked with him, and I know Ryan worked with him, but it is pretty amazing discography.
It's insane.
Yes. So my question is, and also I hang out with people who make music. They let me around them. It's nice. And let's just say that there's a difference between his discography, his persona online, which is amazing. He's like very clear, no bullshit, super articulate, extremely reflective, and very generous with his, you know, um, uh, person, and and the discussions about him in the circles of people making records, and it's not the same person. Like the person we see online in the discography show a truly amazing human being, and then everybody I know recently who's related relationship stories of working with him has not been that glowing. I want to understand why is the difference. Are people jealous? What's going on? Do you know?
You know, it's it's just it's hard work. There's a lot to do. I mean, what the thing that he talks about is the ability to just do nothing but follow the art, right? Which is amazing. And that is exactly what you should do. And he's 100% right. Like there cannot be any other consideration. But for that to happen while you're making a record, that has to be facilitated by people. And those people are working fucking hard to make sure that whatever needs to be facilitated is facilitated in the moment so that you're not the one who's broken the thing that's supposed to
The
be
flow.
happening.
Yeah.
So it's not, I mean, it's not like he's a different person. I mean, that's exactly what's going on in those sessions. But I think it's more that, like, he doesn't want to have a relationship with the engineer while he's tracking the band because he's got to be listening to the band. So it's really hard work, but look at the records you get to work on. Like you're talking about his discography. I mean, those are the records that you work on if you're working with him. So I think it's just a very, very high pressure gig because also, if you screw up the flow, well, you're not going to work for him anymore, because that can't happen because then you're breaking the spell. And the point of everything he's talking about, it's easy to think about it afterwards and stuff like that. But in the moment, while you're in a studio and you're wearing headphones and you might have all kinds of other stuff going on and the label's putting a lot of pressure on you for this record and whatever, for him to be able to create this bubble where all you are is an artist, it's super important. And there are a lot of people making that bubble impenetrable. So it's a really high pressure gig, but you put the pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
That's what
I
I
figured
would.
it was something like that. I think it's a an intensity of relationship in the heat of the moment that maybe afterwards feels over the top because I mean the artist, the only thing that's unexpendable in a process like that is the artist. Everybody else can be replaced.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and if you think about like what I was talking about before, you were probably actually doing something at that point. But talking about like the first 2 days I worked with Rick, where I'm tracking drums right like 3 feet away from Chad Smith in a live room in headphones and recording Surge. I've never met any like the sort of breadth of what needs to happen. He's not thinking, well, that's tracking drums, that's programming, that's tracking vocals. The guy's never seen the tapes before. He's thinking, this is what we got to do to make this music right. So let's do that.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's like you feel sort of like taken for granted a little bit because like, well, hold on a second, who's thinking about, but why would he be thinking about you? That's not the point of being there at all.
Yeah.
Like there was a great conversation I had with someone. I was supposed to work with a band. I told them my schedule, I was going to be out of the country. Like I'm not around until this date. And then I got an email like, hey, so they're going to start on this date. And it was 3 or 4 days before I was supposed to be back. And I'm like, look, I'm really sorry, but like I told you, I'm out of town. And this guy said, look, getting the band to care about your schedule is like going outside and trying to stop a blizzard with your hands. Like, just get over it. Either you're going to fly back or someone else is going to do it. And that's that. And fair enough. But I think, I mean, and you must feel this too. And I think you get to do it probably more because you're doing a lot of production as well, or you're playing on the records or whatever, but you want to feel indispensable because it's such an important thing going on that you really want to be part of it. And if you're dispensable, then you're not really part of the gig. So I think that is probably where a lot of the, not resentment, but where some of that feeling starts to creep in.
I think that
But
makes a
why
lot
would
of
it be
sense.
different?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you for this fantastic answer, Doctor. Um, so I'm gonna transcribe it and put it in my newsletter. Um, and then my other question, I mean, I don't want to make our other esteemed guest wait too long in the green room, but my other question, before I go back to construction, is something I've been reflecting here. You talk to a lot of people, huh? And you do a lot of master classes and stuff like that. Do you think, and I have my own answer, but I want to know what you think. For people who are just getting into the mixing thing, or even the tracking, do you think that it's harder for them to be able to work in the digital environment, having not been forced to go through the analog boot camp before?
No, I don't think so. I think the problem is that the good software you use to make records looks like the analog thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think like the some of the most creative people I know who've come up in the digital world are the ones who work in Ableton because it doesn't look anything like a console and a tape machine. That doesn't mean I think that technically you can do all of the stuff you can do in Pro Tools if you're making a record in a more traditional way and recording people, though people do it. But I think, yeah, I don't know. I mean, because I could also easily answer the question the other way, like just discipline. I think what was great about the analog world was limited resources. Like we were talking about the 99 Problems mix. I had two compressors and rented a third, and I had no automation. And it's one of the best mixes I've done. And not because I didn't have that stuff, but what will happen very, very quickly is you will go into the weeds and you're not listening anymore. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
hardest thing to learn is how to listen. And when you've got a million bits of technology in front of you, it's easy to forget to actually listen to the big picture. Whereas when you're doing a rough mix and you're not going to use any effects and you're just pushing up faders, it's tough. So I think the workflows are important because you want to keep things simple while you're learning. And what tends to happen now is people learn in a really, really complicated environment. And as they get better on the engineering side anyway, things start to simplify. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how I've been as an engineer. I use
Mm-hmm.
less and less gear when I track now.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're doing it just fully digital and it's infinite, like, okay, now I've scaled back to 200,000 things.
Yeah.
That's different than
Uh,
scaling back to three.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. But I think a little more, I'm gonna be a little more stark. I think it's really difficult for people to wrap their head around the reasons why their stuff doesn't sound the way they want unless they've been in an environment that's more controlled than a digital workstation. Because there are so many places could go wrong. And most I have a lot of guys here who are coming up and they're really good, otherwise they wouldn't be here. Like we filter, right? And even the best ones, sometimes I see them do things in Ableton or in Logic or Pro Tools, and I look at it and I'm like, and I say, hey, why did you do that? And the answer is, oh, I saw you do it on a video, or I saw Andrew
Yeah.
do it on a video. And I'm like, but this is the exactly wrong thing to do right now, and that's the reason why your shit is hurting your eyes. Why don't you turn it off? And I was like, well, they don't know what would happen if they turn it off. There's this like kind of not knowing the signal flow and not knowing, and it's a hindrance in the awareness in the conception of how things work. All of them are able to produce the shit out of everything. They're amazing. They're fast too, and they can do backflips and tricks and everything. But without the foundation, if there's a problem, they're stuck. And
Yeah.
it's tough. I don't know how to. I'm curious because Puremix, we tend to try and make sure people learn stuff. Um, I am trying to figure out a way to create a controlled, basically a redux of that immense playground with infinite toys, which is, I think you're right, it's a problem. It's too many options. Yeah. And I'm trying to, the Puremix plugin suite is one of those things, but I'm trying to come up with new ideas on how to do a redux so people are forced to pay attention to what's going on, at least during their learning phase, and then they can do whatever the
Well,
fuck they want.
I think one of the great things I've seen is people teaching like the way recording technology progressed. So like first
Mm-hmm.
you're going to mix in mono, you have absolutely no effects, you just have faders. Now we're going to give you a pan pot. Now we're going to give you
Mm-hmm.
one EQ on the mix bus. Now we're going to
Mm-hmm.
let you have a compressor, but only one. And
Mm-hmm.
so that way you are learning as you go, and you can build it up pretty quickly. I mean, you could do this over the space of just a few weeks or whatever,
Yep. Yep.
but yeah, and that will teach you to listen, because at first you're just like, oh, I need the kick drum to do something. Like, well, the kick drum is the kick drum. Now make it work. And I
Yep.
think that's the biggest lesson, is that no specific element needs to sound a certain way. They
Yep.
just need to work
That's
together.
Yep. Yep. And that's in the vein of what I'm trying to put together for a new Puremix thing. So voila. Those were my two questions that I came up with
All
while
right.
on my
Nice.
scaffolding.
Very good.
Um, I have one comment on these things. LEDs are the devil. LEDs are the devil. And like the
All right.
devil, they make themselves highly desirable in the first place. But once you really get to know them, you really want out of there.
Well, it's in the name, light emitting devil.
That's what it is. There you go.
Nice.
All right, my friend. It's really nice to see you.
All
Fabs, you
right,
have
put on your hard
two more
hat.
minutes before you get back
Oh,
to
you
it.
need to.
I have a
Oh,
question.
yeah. Yeah,
I
hit
would
it.
like to hear from you guys, because around the time that I started with Puremix, shortly before, the first Andrew Scheps videos came to Puremix, and you broke the internet for a little while. You at least broke Gear Sluts.
Mm-hmm.
I think I can still say the original name. Uh, you broke the message board for sure. And this was when, I believe your first one was when you did the dual mix of Ziggy Marley's Fly Rasta. You did one on a console, one in Pro
Mm-hmm.
Tools. And
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
would love to just hear from the two of you how that idea came to be from the first place, because at the time, Puremix was Fab, and then John Paterno shortly after, and then the Fly Rasta thing and all that. And yeah.
Well, I can answer that. Um, we started Puremix, just Guillaume and myself, with one camera in that room over there that's being tortured by the contractor. And and it was doing very well. I was very happy with it and everything. And then I realized this is very one-sided and dumb. We have to have other people share their views, otherwise this is stupid. So so I called my friends, I called John, and I called Andrew. I remember calling Andrew. It was a Saturday morning, our NAM breakfast tradition. And I said, hey, Andrew, Guillaume has coded the system so we can have mentors. It took forever, months. And now I'm very confident that this may be a good idea. I can't promise it's a good idea, but I think it's a good idea for you to do some stuff with us. I remember that conversation very well
Yeah.
because I had thought about it for a long time. I said, I value my friendship with Andrew more than having Andrew on the platform by a long shot. So it took me, we were kind of ready the year before, but I didn't feel confident that it was a good idea at the time because we were not big enough and we didn't have the technology. And then once I saw the technology and I knew it worked and it would not fuck up, I was like, then that's when I started calling my friends, and you and John were the first two. You, John, and Ryan West were the first three people whom I called and say, "Hey, that's that." But I saved it for that breakfast. I remember that. That was
Yeah.
fun.
And
And the idea of doing, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the idea of doing both was because the Ziggy Marley record was right during my transition from the console into the box. And
Yep.
that entire record was done with some hardware inserts. I hadn't gotten rid of all the outboard gear, but I wasn't using the console at all at that
Mm-hmm.
point. And I just thought,
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I have mixed on the console recently enough that I don't have to like remember anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm mixing in the box now. Let's just do both. And it also, it was kind of before people were deconstructing mixes that were already done. And it
Yep.
never occurred to us that I would like just pull up the mix I'd already done and talk about it. Like, well, why would anyone? It turns out like that's a really good idea, but it didn't occur to
Yep.
us. So,
Yep.
yeah, and we did it. It was 2 days in a row. I think I did the
Yep.
analog first.
Uh,
No,
Analog
I think,
first and then digital.
and
No,
then
you did analog first and then digital.
right. And I remember when we were doing the analog one, I was still going to use some of the plugins in the box.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking like, okay, I need to remember what I did. And then after about 20 minutes, I realized, well, that can't be. So those two mixes were from scratch and had nothing to do with the album mix.
I know. They were good though. They sounded great. Actually, we were listening to the I think we were listening to the digital mix the second day and comparing with the original. We're like, hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep,
And
yep.
there was so much discussion about like all the words that everybody loves to ascribe to analog were immediately ascribed to the analog mix.
Mm-hmm.
Like just cause.
Yeah.
We shouldn't
I
label them.
rem no, I remember this is the first time I heard uh a joke that I've read 100,000 times since when we put the first pictures like your laptop on the console is like most expensive laptop stand in the universe. Yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember that.
And I kept
Yep,
one power supply on because I had to use the monitor knob.
yep, right. Exactly. Yeah, that was a fun shoot.
Yeah.
That was a fun shoot. I think that was the last, except for Abbey Road, that was the last shoot that Guillaume was on. He was at that one, and then Abbey Road, that was it.
He had enough.
Yeah, but there's a big crew to manage in Bordeaux.
Yeah. Well, he came while we
So
were shooting here too, but
that's
mostly
true.
for the pub.
Yeah, yeah,
So
that's
Guillaume
true.
also said to say hello, but he is laid up right now. He's got a cold.
He also refuses to have his face on the internet. Can I just
Yeah,
point
he,
out that we did an episode of Between Two Shores with Guillaume, which
yep,
is absolutely hilarious, and he
yes.
will not let us put it out. Which, fair enough, everybody gets right of refusal, but
Yeah.
it's really
Nah,
good. He just
it's
won't
gonna
be
come
on the
out.
internet.
It's gonna come out. Maybe it'll come out for April 1st
I'll let
next
you
year.
guys fight that
Yeah.
out. I'm not going to be
Yes.
I've been
responsible.
fighting it for a
I'll,
year. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Let's organize a vendetta.
Okay.
We could do it. Let's just get the footage from our Andrew Rose. Name it something like mixed deconstruction of something, and then release it as a video and just see if people pay attention. How's that?
Guillaume will pay attention. That shit'll be down in 5 seconds.
It could be leaked on TikTok. I don't know. We'll see. All right.
Very nice. Awesome.
Okay.
There's a request in the chat for you guys to play saxophone and trumpet together, and I think that we should do it right now with the internet delay, so that you
Yeah, it's not
can't
going to
get in sync
happen.
with each other.
No, I
Gonna
would have to
happen.
know. I would have to know where my saxophone is.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Can I just point out that my trumpet is right next to me, and they had not been serviced in 30 years. And so I was like, okay, I got to find somebody to work on these because I'm going to have to play them on the low roar record. I'm going to start working on when I can. And I'm like, okay, am I going to have to go into Birmingham or whatever? And there was somebody 5 minutes from me. And Fab knows I'm in the middle of nowhere. And they look amazing. 5 minutes away.
wow,
Nice.
is that a back?
No, it's a Benge.
A bench.
And then
Okay.
the Yamaha flugelhorn. Thanks, Dave.
Right. I have the same flugelhorn. I have the same. Nobody knows, but I play a little bit of trumpet too.
And there you go. Probably better than me.
No, very likely.
It's pretty likely.
Yeah. No, I don't know. All right. This is great. This is
Right.
a lovely break.
Very
Excellent.
nice.
Well, go get your hard hat on and your lederhosen and get back to work.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Ciao, guys.
Thanks,
See,
Fab.
Fab.
Bye.
Coming up next on here is he's been very patient with us, and very excited to have him on. We're gonna just sort of abandon timeline for a little bit here for the sake of conversation. Like everyone to welcome the amazing Steve Jenowick. Hello, Steve.
Shit. Hey, Steve.
It's been so long since we've spoken.
I know. It's hours.
It's hours. Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Am I not on the camera anymore?
It's
There
very
you are.
skinny right now, but I'm gonna get out of here once I get you guys talking. Yeah. So it
I
was
knew I was
fun.
coming. I knew you were going to bring me on because the gardener next door just showed up.
Oh,
Perfect.
perfect. Yeah.
That's how you
Like
know.
I've been sitting here for 2.5 hours, and then the
Right.
charger. Yeah.
The lawnmower
Yeah.
just started. So
Yeah.
if you hear lawnmower in the background, it's the joys of mixing at home.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to have you guys on. There have been so many talks on Dolby Atmos in the last couple of years. We've had Steve on Andrew's show in the Atmos panel, and you guys have done a whole bunch of Atmos panels that, despite being involved with the first one, I've watched all of them because I'm a little into it now.
Now we know who the guy is.
Yeah, the one viewer. No, but yeah, I was very excited to have you guys on, and one of the things that I thought that we could talk about, there's first and foremost, Steve, I'm going to let you kind of take it away in a second here. I'd love to hear more of the stories of just you guys running into each other in various things and how you got to know each other. I think starting there would be great. And then I also think that like a little bit of an update of what what 2023 has looked like for Atmos, because I think that the last sort of big talk that I could find happened around January of this year, or NAM, which might have been April, maybe. But anyway, it's been a few months, I think, and I think that things have possibly changed a little bit, and maybe not. Maybe that's what you'll say. But there's your idea board, and I'm going to slowly exit stage left.
So,
You
Atmos,
start.
Well, well, I can say it's been fun. Actually, it's been really fun listening to this because, again, you're usually on the other side. So
I'm much more
a lot of
comfortable on the other side, I got to say.
I know the feeling. Yeah. Well, now I have to ask questions, and I'm not good at that either. So, because usually I just make up stuff. But I do remember the first time we met, though. You probably don't.
Well, I was trying to think which was first. I don't know, so you should definitely tell that.
I believe we did a Weezer live broadcast at Capitol, and I was your assistant. And
Yeah.
that's all I remember. I don't remember like how it turned out or anything like that.
What I remember about that is we had Marshalls in the same room as the piano, and we're like, okay, we'll put blankets, whatever, and it was coming in at the soundboard, and the guitar was louder than the piano.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens. Yeah. When you have Marshalls.
Exactly. Wow, I'd actually forgotten about that session until now.
Yeah. It took me
That
a
was
while
awesome.
because I was trying to remember the first time we actually met, and I think that was it. But then we
Yeah.
did get to do a cool project together. Well, it was cool doing it. I don't know if it ended up being cool, but that was the Josh Groban record,
Yeah. Yeah.
which, so Al was the engineer on
Yeah.
that. And I remember Al and I talking about it. He said, "Oh yeah, we're gonna do a Josh Groban record." I said, "Okay, we had worked with Josh before. That was not unusual for Al to do a Josh Groban record.
Yeah.
The unusual part was that they told us Rick Rubin was going to produce it. Like, wow, okay, that's an interesting concept. Like, and it was going to be a big orchestral record.
Yeah.
And it was fun. It was. I mean, I remember distinctly every day Rick coming in because we always had the reverb returns at the right side of the console next to the door. And I remember Rick would come in and just mute Al's reverbs as he went because he never wanted to hear the reverb.
Yeah. I mean, that session, I think it was a little bit more difficult than I think Al was used to too, because we had too many players in that room, and it was. Yeah, I remember we had to flip the resonators on the wall, and it was actually a little difficult to get stuff going, which Al's not. I mean, that guy could put up a 57 and make an orchestra sound amazing. So I remember it being like that. And I also remember that I had to be reading the scores, which, I mean, I read music, but reading scores is like, you need to do that all the time to be good at it. And it was brutal. Like, it was a lot of work, but it was great. It was
It was
so
a lot of
great.
work, and there was a lot of, it was Rick. So Rick would have an idea and just say it, and an orchestra doesn't pivot like that.
No.
It's not.
No. Like, okay, we'll take a 10.
Play the part this way. It's like, no. We have to like write stuff and copy it, and like, yeah, it was a little interesting from everybody's point of view, I think.
Yeah, but we just did it. I mean, some of the stuff we would end up doing the next day with the changes, but some of it, like, we got 10 minutes and off we go.
Off we go. Yeah, it was interesting. David Campbell, I think, was the arranger, wasn't
Yeah.
he? Yeah.
Yeah, and he was
fun.
conducting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great.
That was one of the more interesting sessions, I will say, and not anything bad. I mean,
No.
it was great. Everybody was great. That Like, I mean, you guys were just talking about it. Everybody's, oh, Rick's so difficult to work with. He's not difficult to work with at all.
There's just a lot
you
of
just
work.
have to show up. Yeah, be ready because something's going to change, which
Yeah.
is great.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and obviously David Campbell is one of the nicest people to work with and so creative, you know.
And so is Josh.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Sweetheart.
And one of the
Yeah.
funniest guys I've ever met. I mean, his persona is nothing like you would think it would be.
He's a funny guy. I've known him for a long time. But now, was that before we did the master class?
I think so. I think that was before the big band.
It was.
Yeah.
Because that, for those that don't know, Al and I decided we were going to, we had done Mix with the Masters, we had done classes, and we thought, well, why don't we just do this ourselves? Like, we keep having to go places to do classes, and we just talk about Capitol. So why don't we just do one at Capitol? So we set out and we were going to do this master class, and I always joke, we put the email out to like sign up, and the first person that signed up and paid the money was Andrew Scheps.
It was 5 minutes after you sent the email too.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't like, oh, I thought about it for a couple of days. I paid for it and then went into the house and said, oh, by the way, Debbie, I just paid to do this workshop. Like, I hope that's okay.
Well, yeah, and then I remember thinking, like, Al and I looked at it, and he was like, well, call him, and like, he can just come, like, he's a friend. Like, and you were like, nope, I'm paying my money because I want to sit in the front and I want to take notes and I want to ask questions, and that's exactly what you did. It was great.
Yeah, that was absolutely amazing. I mean, I think I've talked about it before, but the couple of things that were incredible about it were, the first thing, so it was 2 days recording a big band. So he's setting up on the first day, and first of all, some of the mic choices like C12 VRs as overheads, and I remember everybody being like, C12 VRs, those are no good. They're not like C12s, and so there were a few things like that, and like, wow, okay, cool. And you'd hear the individual mics while people are warming up, and Al's paying attention, but he's done it so many times in that room and with those players that he moves a couple of mics around and he's in the control room doing nothing really, it looks like.
Well, and he's chatting with the players.
Yeah, well, he's talking to people, and I'm hearing like the drums and hearing things and thinking like, when's he gonna EQ that? Like, those overheads sound dark, and I'd be like, I don't know how you can work like this. Like, this is insane. And I'm thinking like, well, maybe because it's a workshop, and like, no, but they are actually going to use this stuff on a record. And then they do the first run through of the first chart, and it starts with one of those big blap and then into the groove. So everybody in the band plays this huge chord, including the drums, and it sounded so good it made me laugh out loud, like really loud. And everybody was looking at me, but it was insane. Absolutely insane.
And
then I spent most of the 2 days sitting down at the end of the console so I could watch what Al was doing. Because you sat behind him, you could hear it, but you couldn't see.
Yeah.
And so pretty early on, I was down at the end.
Yeah,
exactly. But just trying to figure out, well, what is he even, like, what's making him decide to change something? And that took me like half of the first day to even have an inkling. And then you'd ask him about it and be like, I don't know. No. That was amazing. And then we had cigar and story time the second half of both days.
That's always the best part. Yeah. Well, because second day was supposed to be mixing. Yeah. And he mixed the song in like 15 minutes. So,
Yeah. And we tracked half the record, I think. We'd done like 5 or 6 songs.
We did the entire album.
He didn't mix the whole thing, because there were going to be overdubbed a couple of the songs. Like the vocals weren't done, right? Or something.
Yeah, we didn't, but we recorded the whole album in that one day.
Yeah.
And then, subsequently we ended up putting out the DVD. And that moment you're talking about, if you listen to the DVD, the audio that's on the DVD is just the audio off the console. So you can literally hear that first run through, and it sounds exactly like that. But that's the way Al always was.
Yeah.
We did a record that John McBride was part of. We did a Christmas record for Martina, and John came out, and same thing. Like, he was there at like 6 o'clock in the morning with me setting up. Like, he was like, I want to see the whole thing. I want to, and he sat at the end of the console and he just watched the whole thing. And at the end of the day, he was still there because he was first one in, last one out. And he just turned, he said, that was the most complicated nothing I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
different
Exactly.
way of making records. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, so one thing I was going to ask, and you kind of answered it earlier, but you didn't come up in studios and have to be an assistant and stuff like that. But I guess you were around it because you were the guy in the
Yeah,
room.
I mean, I got to be in on a lot of sessions, but there was a lot of stuff like, I mean, I didn't miss not being a runner. I mean, that was fine,
Yeah,
you know.
nobody knows that.
But yeah, I do feel as though I missed out on the watching people work and also like watching people make rock records because that wasn't what I was working on. Rock records were not made with synclaviers. Like that was just not going to happen. So I wish I'd had more time like that. And but you know, if you're in the room, you're in the room. But that's why I feel like my engineering is all like I don't know what I'm doing. I really have no idea what I'm doing. And mixing, when I started mixing, absolutely no idea what I was doing. But
Right.
you just make it up until it sounds good, and then you try and remember what you did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, somebody asked me like, how do you start a mix? I said the same way as everybody, with my head going, oh my God, how is this going to work? Like, what am I going to
Yeah,
do? I don't know
yeah.
how to do this. Like these
I'm going to
tracks
be
are,
fired. Everyone will
yeah,
hate me. Yeah,
yeah, this will never work. I don't, why am I here? So, and then, an hour later, it's okay. But
yeah.
yeah. So how did you learn then? Like, how did you learn to mic a drum kit and stuff like that? If you didn't
Well,
have,
I mean, there were people like Carmen Rizzo, who's on earlier, and Jack Rubin, and
Mhm.
obviously Bruce on that Michael Jackson record. I mean, that was quite the education, and Eddie Delana, who then brought me in on a bunch of projects afterwards. Yeah, just watching, and then like John was saying, Paterno, I've always had a home studio, and I think it's this like own the means of production, but not in a communist like hardcore way. But like I never felt like I could spend someone else's money and force them to go to a studio when they didn't have the money. So I wanted to be able to make records at home. And so then I just had to do it. And I didn't own very many microphones. So I could only use 3 microphones until I bought a 4th one. And I had to buy a mic pre then. So yeah, I think it just, and the other thing was at Miami, you had lots and lots of practice. I mean, you assisted for the first 2 years, and then for your junior and senior year, you could book time in the studio. And I just every single time I could either help somebody out or book my own session, I did it. So I got a lot of hours in. I wasn't any good, but I worked my ass off trying to understand what the hell was going on.
right. Yeah. Well, I think I was kind of like you in that, I was never in the band and stuff like that. So I, imposter syndrome, we all have it, but it was like, well, if I can't be that guy, I better be the best this guy I can be. So I have to figure out how this works, and I have to figure out what they're going to want to do and that kind of stuff. And, you
Yeah.
know, it
And
was,
the few
yeah,
times I did assist, because like I did a couple of sort of summer internships and things like that, I really quickly, I was the guy who was thinking one step ahead of the engineer. Like I knew what they were going to ask for next, because once I'd worked with them once, and that's when you're a good assistant. So I just made sure that I was a really good assistant. And then when you do that, you learn the process. Like, okay, and especially if it's someone you like I got to work with Fred Catero, did some of the early Chicago records, an amazing engineer. And watching him do stuff, it's like, okay, that's the way you make a record. The same way
right,
sometimes you learn that's not how I want to make a record or whatever. But assisting, even though I didn't do that much of it, that was huge.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I mean, I got to sit next to the best guys in the business for so long, and I'll do stuff on a mix now and be like, oh yeah, I remember Elliot taught me that, or whatever it was. Like, there was a point at Capitol where Paula would call me. I'd been there a long time, and she'd say, "Oh, I got this session, and none of the guys can do it. It's an assisting gig." And I was like, "Well, all right. Well, what is it?" "Well, it's going to be Glenn Johns." I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to assist on that gig." Like, I would have fought you for that. Are you
Yeah,
kidding
I
me?
will pay you to do
Yeah.
that.
Like, of course I want to assist on that project, So yeah, it just always, it's too bad that that system kind of isn't around anymore, because it's, I still don't think there's a way to learn to do this without being in the control room and watching it happen,
Yeah, and I mean, thank God for Puremix and Mix with the Masters and stuff. So at least there's some documentation of it for people to learn. But yeah, I remember talking to Ben Montench because he was doing his first solo record. People don't know he's Tom Petty's keyboard player, among other things. Like one of those keyboard players that plays all the notes that were left out. Like,
Right.
oh, that's what this song needed.
And he's on a million records. Most people don't know that.
Yeah, and Glyn was doing the record, and I think he said that at one point he walked in, he was listening to the mix, and he said, "Oh man, it sounds really great, but I think I'd like to hear a little more bass on that." And Glyn's like, "Okay, cool," and pulled all the faders down. And Ben's like, "Wait, what are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I can't just turn up the bass."
Yeah.
And so, it took him 20 minutes, but he remixed the song with more bass. Amazing, print it, done. But yeah, that like,
but he wasn't scared to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, Al was kind of like that too. It was, there were times where we'd be at the end of the session and, they'd be like, "Oh, this is great," and I'll be like, "Nah, that sucks," and he'd just pull all the faders down and put it back together. It's one of the things about, even as an assistant in the analog days, and I don't want those days back, but there was something to it that we were always mixing, whether you were mixing the headphones or you were putting up the rough mix or you were, so I mean, I sat with Al every day and he was the engineer and he was, what you heard coming out of the speakers was him, but I had 6 headphone mixes on the side that I was doing. So I was mixing every single day. And every time you put the tape up, you could just pull the faders down and you had to start over again. So every mix was unique.
Yeah.
And you got to work it, now you work on stuff and, there's parts in there that the producer forgot he put on 6 months ago because the balance of Pro Tools hasn't changed.
And you balance once. And that I think is a thing. Yeah. Because I was talking about it earlier, making rough mixes or doing the quick rough to the vocal tape or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You learn to balance when you knew you weren't going to use outboard gear on a rough mix. Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
and it didn't matter because you didn't have it tomorrow at the other studio. So why do it now? Don't put the Fairchild on it because tomorrow we're going to be a place that doesn't have one. So they're going to get spoiled if you put that on there. Or whatever it is. So yeah, it's and the funny part is today, we have the ability to not be precious because we can do save as or whatever, but everybody's precious. And it's like, just pull the faders down and start over again. It's more fun that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And terrifying.
Now, I have another question for you. And then we will get into Atmos, I promise. Because, we all bought these speakers. We might as well talk about it.
Yeah. We were in a group call with a bunch of Atmos mixers earlier, and everybody's background is more speakers.
Yes. Yeah, I have a lot of speakers back there. Maurice will be so happy.
Yeah.
But now you started doing the classes, right? Online classes, mix with the master, stuff like that. Do you ever worry about giving out all your secrets?
You know the answer to that.
Well,
there are no secrets.
But do you ever think about it?
No, I mean, I actually am excited to tell people how I solved a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's cool. And part of it is because I think I'm so awesome that I solved a problem, or whatever. But I think it's important. And and also it turns out that I'm good at teaching. I guess that's just in the blood from my parents and whatever. So I enjoy doing it and it's not difficult for me. And so I think it's just, it's something I like doing. And if there were secrets, like, I mean, there have been a couple of records right after I stopped mixing on the console where the artist wanted me to mix on the console. I'm like, well, I don't do that anymore. Oh, well, we want to do that. And, not in so many words, said, well, just go rent a studio that has the console and mix it yourself then. Because I don't want to mix it on the console. It's not where I feel creative and I'm going to do my best work. And, horrible, it's not the gears, it's the ears or whatever. But it is, the reason people are good is how they hear. And it's like in Al's case, it's obvious because he's not using anything. But even someone who uses a million pieces of outboard gear, it's the way they hear stuff. It's not what tricks they've got. Like there are no tricks. I suppose there are, and there aren't even secrets. There's just techniques that you may not have seen, or so give them out, man. Let's make people make really good records forever.
Well, the other thing I find is that people latch on to stuff, and like you said, that was the thing that solved a problem. Like I don't do that every day. Like I never do that.
No,
I did that one time.
always different. There was a guy who worked on a record, and it was with Bruce Swedien, and he'd worked with him for a long time and whatever. But he had sort of recall notes of how Bruce recorded stuff, and he was pretty consistent with how he did things. And so he was going to do a record, and he's like, "Great, man! I've got this template for how to do it," and it didn't work out at all. But he was afraid to let go of that because it's like, well, but this is how. But every piano is different. Every piano player is different, and Bruce didn't do that because that's what Bruce did with a piano. It's because he heard the piano, and that's what he did for that piano that day. And even though it looked similar, it wasn't.
Yeah, but it's having that, like you said about Al. Why'd you do that? I don't know.
Yeah, well, more like, well, I didn't do anything. Like, yeah, you did. I saw you. Like, really?
Well, it wasn't right, so I changed it.
Yeah, but sometimes he didn't even know he had. Like, it was just.
Oh yeah.
Like, just
he
did
did
it
stuff all the time, and he didn't realize he was doing it.
Yeah.
To watch it all the time, and sometimes him changing it was him talking to the bass player or talking to the guitar player. It was just going out. Either going out and asking a question or having them come in and listen. I mean, we always tried to get the band in first, like as quickly as possible. And then they would go, "Oh, you're doing that? Oh, and you're doing that. Okay. Al, is the guitar a little dull, Al? Should I turn it? Yeah, do that." And they'd go back out. We wouldn't change a thing.
No, exactly.
Everything's great.
What confidence that takes to know, because I would be panicking like it's my fault. It's absolutely my fault, and I got to fix it. And every once in a while, it's something to do with what's going on out there. But like, I'm going to get fired because the guitar doesn't sound bright enough, so I'm going to EQ it. And the confidence to just say, like, I know what I'm doing, and it's not happening, so that's you.
Right.
It's brilliant.
The worst one is a bad arrangement. Like you'd be with an orchestra out there, and it's like, why isn't this sounding right? And then you're like, we're doing everything the same that we did it yesterday. what and then you realize, it's not on the paper. Okay, it's just not going to be good.
Yeah. I mean, I've had that with rock bands where, like, all of a sudden the drum kit sounds terrible.
Yeah,
you're like, oh man, and you're like, that's when you're going to get fired. Like, you can't get a good drum sound. Like, what's going on? And then they finally move on to another song, and all of a sudden it's like one of the best drum sounds you've ever gotten, and you literally haven't done anything, and neither is the drummer.
Yeah.
But it's like that song is not happening.
Yeah. It's funny because the ones that are the easy ones end up being the ones everybody talks about, and or being, I don't know if they're hits, but whatever, but they're the easy ones, and you kind of go, why was that so like you talked about, the Jay-Z mix. It was because you didn't have anything, so you just did it. And it was, and then the hard ones are the ones you hate. But So moving on, because now we're in this new world. How has your Atmos experience been in the last?
It's great. Hey,
how much
Mark.
are you doing? Are you doing a lot, or is it split? I know,
It's weird. Like, there'll be periods when I'm only doing Atmos, and then periods when I'm only doing stereo, and it's still, sometimes I'm doing stereo only and they don't want Atmos, and then I'm doing Atmos for a record I didn't do the stereo for. So it's all over the place. But yeah, and we had chats about this in the group about, like, oh, hold on a second, I'm going to have 4 mix buses, one for each of the the binaural metadata settings and things. And I've actually done that. And with my template, I only have 3 objects left if I use everything in the template. And it used to be I never used more than 15. Like, it's 15 objects and I'm done. And I'd get calls from a label like, did you mean to only use 15 objects? Like, yes, that's me. Now I'm using like 80.
Right.
Just,
but they're all sitting in the same place.
Yeah.
Guys,
and then I put strips to strip them out and what?
I want to pause you. I want to go back to the giving away your secrets thing for a second.
Okay.
I think that that's fascinating. And I have, I think, an interesting like perspective on it because of, being part of the body that hands out Andrew's template, right? So Andrew's mix template is available from at least a previous version of it. I'm sure it's evolved. Is available like for download on Puremix, and so many people have downloaded that and dissected it, and there's videos all over YouTube of people dissecting it. And the interesting thing is I do Mix Tank like live mix reviews on some Monday since we've stopped doing Andrew every week. And people will say in the comments, I used Andrew's template for this, but I can't get it to sound like Andrew or whatever. And that's just one of the things going back of like, you could literally put somebody at Andrew's, back when you were using the consoles, you could put them at those consoles. You could put them at Al's console. You could put him in Vance Powell's room, who has a very distinct sound, and it would never sound like Vance or you or Al. And it's just an important thing to, like, as Andrew, you've said on other interviews in the past, that those are amazing learning tools. They're not the means to the end, just like any piece of gear, right?
Yeah, I mean, it might be things you haven't thought of doing, or you get like, ooh, parallel compression, and there are 3 different ones to try on the drum kit. Like, right, okay. Yeah. But I mean, I think, and Steve will back me up on this, if you mix the same song every day for a week, you would have totally different mixes every day, because you start down a path very early on because you're reacting to something you're hearing. You think you're doing the same thing every day, and you absolutely are not. The balance would be different. The sounds you get would be different because you're starting building from a different place. So I don't know how to make it sound like me. Like,
yeah.
I mean, well, I know how to make it sound like me is limit the shit out of it and turn it into a square wave, right?
We'll talk about Death Magnetic soon enough, Andrew. Okay, so to add to that, I want to bring John Paterno back in. John, in the past year, has become a professor at Berkeley in Boston and is teaching people every day. So I know that he has a lot probably to say about what he's experienced as well. So John, welcome back. And then we will get on to our Atmos conversation.
Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for being here for it. It's awesome. So yeah, do you have anything to add to that, or like words of wisdom for people that are looking at stuff like that?
I think Andrew just said it perfectly. It's like, it's kind of cool to check out what somebody does. You might get an idea here or there, but the idea of getting somebody else's sound by having a template is crazy. It just is. We were talking a bit earlier, maybe you and Fab were talking a bit earlier about limited tool sets and how that teaches people to innovate. And I make students do mixes with 2 EQ points on an EQ. That's all they can use. And it really makes them think and listen. And I think that's something that, Andrew, you definitely touched upon, and Steve, you as well. It's like, that's the point.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're mixing music, not gear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's I think it's Alan Parsons. I saw like a Instagram thing or something like that, and he said something to the effect of audiophiles don't use their equipment to listen to your music. They use your music to listen to their gear or whatever. Yes. And I think that that's been sort of ringing in my head, in the background since like reading that is like, this is about the music. It's not about the plugins and all of that stuff. So, yeah.
I was at an audiophile show. We were doing something, and some guy sat me down. Oh, you have to listen to this. Oh, played the song. He said, "What do you think?" I said, "That was a horrible song." No, not the song, the speakers. I said, I couldn't get past the horrible song. Like, it was, I didn't like it because the song wasn't any good. But
yeah, it doesn't matter what it sounds like.
But
yeah.
I mean, I think people, especially in that world, they would be shocked on some of the equipment we use to make records. and how kind of not good some of it actually is, which it makes it good. I mean, how many of us started on NS10s?
Well, and one of the things I learned from John very early on was a Dynacomp pedal as the parallel drum thing. And I didn't even have a level match box at that point. I'm just slamming line level into that thing, bringing it
great,
back on
right?
my little Mackie, and it was awesome.
All the noise, all the.
I love that.
Yeah.
This is how much geeking I've done. That was your answer to a batter's box question on Pensado's place about favorite piece of gear under $200 was the Dynacomp pedal.
There you go.
Yeah. Nice. All right.
Awesome.
So
Now you have
just
9
as a
plug-in versions of them that don't do the same thing.
yeah, as from the moderator perspective here. So we've been at it for about 3 hours, and we have so much to cover with Andrew. Still, we basically got to we're starting to light the fire on when some pretty crazy things started happening for you, and I'm guessing that we're gonna have to come back for a part 2.
Is that
And
because you're a pussy and you don't want to stay up?
if you want to go, it's 5:20
No,
here.
actually,
I'm thinking about
it's
you.
really, I know.
Yeah.
Come on, guys.
I don't
I
want to
just think
browse just quickly
No,
go
no,
over
no,
that
no,
important
no.
part of your career. So
I think that's wise only because for the last year, I don't drink anymore and I go to bed early. I've gotten really boring. So yeah, I'm not gonna go till 2 a.m. like we did sometimes.
yeah, yeah. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to do a little bit of a Atmos discussion, and we have Steve here. It's just amazing, and John I've been sort of talking to here and there about Atmos as well, and I know that you've gotten into it. So I'd like to chat a little bit about that, maybe take a couple questions from the audience, and then we'll make our plans for a part 2, if that sounds good to everybody. So
Absolutely.
cool. Before I do that too, there are a lot of people who are also on the invite list for this thing that had busy schedules today. So we'll have fun doing a part 2 as well. So
And when we do part 2, I need you to take a note that we should probably tell the Snickers bar story.
okay. All right.
Now I want to know what that is. Maybe I don't.
Yeah, I know. Do we cover that now?
No, there's nothing dirty. Come on.
Okay. All right, cool. I have my note. All right. So yeah, let's chat some Atmos. So I said before Steve came on here that you guys have already said so much about the topic, and I'm interested to kind of see where you see the state of things, in August of 2023. It's been a few months since I've seen any significant interviews about it on the topic for it, and again, I think John's got some interesting perspectives. John's been working in headphones, and you stop that.
I don't.
So okay, all right. Well, we'll kick this off. I bet you will, or some questions or something. But
I think the first thing to remember is that we still don't know what the hell we're doing.
right.
We're literally making this up as we go.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, it's transitioned from the what the hell are we doing to there's plenty of stuff that's not the way we would like it or whatever, but we're just doing it now. I think there are a lot of people who have developed a style, have realized you can develop a style and it doesn't have to be like anyone else's. Sort of like sonically what you do in stereo, now panning is a huge thing that is a real personal taste. And there's some people who are super musical with it and some people not so much. And you kind of come up with ideas about things. And then, I mean, what's actually really exciting is I remember a while ago, there would be so many times I would wake up or in the shower, think of something to try on a mix. And in stereo, that doesn't happen that much anymore. It'll be a detail thing oh, hold on a second. What if I keyed this thing with that? Because I've been having trouble with this on a mix. But with Atmos, it's still big picture fucking earth mover stuff that'll completely change the way you mix. And it's okay. And it's great. And I think that's where I've been at the last few months.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and the other thing is, again, we don't have the tools, so we're making them up.
Yeah.
And it has been kind of fun. I mean, I had, plenty of those shower moments like, oh, what if I did it that way? That's right. I mean, that's how the whole object bed thing came up. It was
Yeah.
literally, it probably happened in my shower because that's where I get all my best ideas.
Yeah.
But
We have all stolen it.
I know.
Everybody's, you're like the Adam of humans. So Noah would, they started over, right? According to that book. So it's a whole, but anyway, there's something that you're the roots of the tree of Atmos templates.
Yes.
Because I had the first one, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're really
you know,
generous with it.
Yeah. And it worked. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, it took me a minute. I mean, it didn't happen, you know, I mean, I worked at that template. It wasn't like I just invented it one day. I mean, it took a while to build.
No, but it had to be invented. We didn't have, 80 years of people leading up to it.
Exactly. And, you know, that was, I mean, certainly was fun. And I was lucky enough where I had the ability and the time and the kind of toy box, the playpen to do it in, because I had a company that was like, you better figure this out because you're the only one, you know, we chose you to figure this out. So go figure it out, you know, which was fun. And I think, you know, really quick, also when we talk about templates, I know mine, Andrew's is probably the same way. Like, I don't have like kick drum EQ template. I don't have vocal chain. It's literally just routing. It's a console, basically.
Yeah.
It's some reverbs at the end, and it's console. And this is how I get from here to here, and that's all it is. So there's no plug and play other than you drop your track, you know, you put the tape on the machine and it comes up on the faders. So at least when I talk about a template, that's what it is. It's just routing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are a million little teeny subtle effect things to help fill the room, but even those change all the time.
Oh, constantly. Change.
See, it's all routing.
Yeah. I actually had to, like, somebody asked me something about the template, you know, my template, and I had to go back and try to remember why I did it. Because I, you know, like there was something in there and I was like, I use that all the time. I don't remember why, like, you know, dude, what's this? I was like, I haven't looked at that plugin in years. I just throw the thing in there and it worked. It still works. So sometimes I have to go back and remember why I did stuff. But it has been the fun part because, like you said, it's a whole new thing, and it's you know, it's a different way to be creative. So that's been kind of the most fun about it.
I like that it's super arrangement based because you really have to figure out musically what can I do to this.
Yeah, John, you made the comment.
Screw it up really easily, really quickly.
Yeah,
I mean, you can. It's harder to ruin a good song in stereo. It's simple to ruin a good song in Atmos. I mean, you can ruin it in a split second. You know. So that part of it, that goes back to the listening thing. Like every once in a while, you have to remember that you're making a record and not an Atmos thing. You know, it's still gotta listen to it.
Yeah. So. Do you have anything in particular that you feel ruins it quickly? Like, you know, how you pull the song apart or spread it out. That
to me, they're two things and they're both obvious, and that's like 90% of what's there. The first is rhythm. You think like, oh, cool, I can take the percussion around the back. And sometimes that is absolutely amazing. And sometimes it destroys the groove. And I remember, and even like really good engineers, when 5/1 mixes started happening, and there were songs where the percussion that you had never heard before because it was the internal groove of the drummer is now in the back. So it's super fucking distracting, and the drum groove isn't happening anymore. So there's that. And then harmonically, like sometimes it's amazing to leave the lead vocal on its own in the front wall and start spreading the harmonies. And sometimes that just makes the melody sound weak. And you've got to understand when and where. And then past that, there's the thing which is not as obvious, but like when you're doing a stereo mix, it's about contrast, right? So you might filter something and then you open up the filter, and that's a big deal and whatever. That sometimes if you're doing a long song, even if it would be really cool, there are a lot of electronic elements and you can move stuff around. If you do that for the whole song, people are exhausted there's something great about having it collapse back to the front wall and then explode back out again, because it's new and it's surprising, and that's what people want, or events and stuff. So those are the three places which I think are really important, and also where you can really make something either boring or horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think anything that, to your point, anything that takes you out of the song is, like, yeah, it's cool to put that little clicky thing in the back, but it turns out to be just an annoying clicky thing in the back. It's like a gnat. Like, what is that? Like, make it stop. And then you push it back up underneath the drum kit or whatever, and it's cool. It's that, like you said, it's that little rhythmic thing or whatever it is. So, and what's appropriate. Again, when I'm mixing a jazz record, that stuff doesn't need to fly around the room. It doesn't need to, it just needs to be a little bit bigger. I mean, I can have space now, so you can feel like you're sitting in the room with the band. I don't need them behind me. They can still be in front of me, but I want to feel like I'm sitting in the room. A lot of the jazz stuff I do, there's, as Trent Reznor calls, there's no magic tricks.
To pull this back to Andrew, because we're interviewing
Who?
Yeah, who's this guy? Sorry, let me get him off screen. Hold on a second.
Exactly.
Yeah. Andrew, why'd you do it? Go in Atmos.
I'm a geek. I mean, and I think we pointed that out many, many times. It was like object-based mixing. Yes, I want to know everything there is to know about that. So it was that. There couldn't possibly be a record-making technology that I didn't want to dive into and know. And then there were also, I've got to say, actually, I mean, one of the things was I had just sold my console and all my analog gear. So I actually had enough money to do it. I'd wanted to do it 2 years before, but I couldn't afford it. It's like, even if you do it with cheap speakers, you need at least 11 of them. That's going to add up. And you need a monitor controller, and you need the I/O to be like, you cannot do an Atmos studio for less than 15 grand and really less than 20. That's going to work.
And by the way, then you have to find somebody to pay you to do it, which
is really difficult.
It's not easy. Yeah.
So I finally had the money to do it, but the main thing, and I still haven't done the whole thing, the catalyst was that even if I don't get any work, I'm going to go back and do the low roar records in Atmos, because I think they're the records I've done that Atmos will serve them incredibly well. There's so many layers, and I've only done one song so far for lots of reasons. But the song, one of the things in a lot of the low roar songs is the outros are way too long when I get them. Like, I could easily chop 32, 48 bars out of that outro. But the thing about Ryan as a songwriter is he would never let me do it. He's like, no, it's good. So then my job was to build the arrangement in a way that made that feel short. So you get to the end of some of those songs, and I've put 30 tracks on top of what was already there. And it was great. It was this energy, and it was this ball of stuff going on. And now I'm spreading it out around the room. And to have a string quartet come in 60 bars into the outro, but each string player is in a different part of the room. So when the basses come in, it's like, holy fuck, because there's nothing else in the front wall that you haven't heard before, and everything else is spread. So that was what made me say, like, even if it doesn't work out work-wise, that's why I'm going to do it.
Yeah, amazing. Okay,
John, I was lucky enough where I got to spend other people's money on it. So.
Nice.
Until recently. Now I don't have that checkbook anymore, which sucks. But
John, you said that you feel like you're mixing for people on vinyl again. I thought that was an interesting comment.
Yeah, to me, I feel like it feels more like an experience of me sitting as a kid in front of a stereo. There's something about the fact, maybe it's just the spatialness, it's the speakers in a room feeling, and not feeling like it has to be kind of completely up and in your face. So I've tried to take advantage of that where I could, and just getting that feeling, the dynamics and things like that. You don't have to compete in the same way, in a weird way, right?
But it's really interesting. I'm putting together a talk that I'm doing at this immersive audio conference, an AES thing up in Huddersfield in a few weeks. And I found the 1970 binaural demonstration record. You remember that one with the red cover? And it's amazing. And I just the artwork for it, but their explanation on the back is that it puts you in the acoustic space. And I was just thinking about that, and then in the context, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people before, but there is nothing less natural than listening to a mix on headphones. Like it's like everything's coming from inside your head. And the fact that you could pan something hard left and nothing is going into your other ear, it's physically uncomfortable because your brain is like, oh, that's not supposed to happen. So as much as we're constantly battling against the thing that makes it sound like it's in a room and not coming out of the middle of your head, because sonically it's destroying what we spent so long making it work like, it's exactly what John's talking about. It is a more natural sound, even though we hate it sometimes because of what it's doing to our mixes. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. I hadn't actually put it together before you said it, but yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you for thank you for making me feel smart.
As you are.
No, it's just that was my experience the first time I messed with it. It was just like, oh, this is like, I want to put on a record. I want to put on the thing. I want to put on a Bob Ludwig mastered version of whatever, right? Or put on, the Blues and the Abstract Truth. That's what it makes me feel like when I'm in that kind of space. And so that's what I've been trying to bring to it when the few I've done. I've only done 2 records at this point. I think I'm on my 3rd. So, yeah, but it's been good in that sense. But the musicality, as both you guys have been talking about, is completely key to me.
Yeah. I had to realize early on, I've said it before, I was never mixing an Atmos demo. It wasn't to show off speakers. It was, I mean, sometimes you did. I mean, there were a couple mixes early on where it was literally to blow people's socks off with this technology. But I knew that going in. It was never intended to be a, sit down and listen to music thing. So yeah, you're always listening, with the
But I
music
think
in
a
mind.
great example, and it's the mix everybody, is introduced to Atmos with, usually it's Rocket Man, to Greg Penny mix. And that is absolutely all about the Atmos, but it's also because it's ridiculously musical and it's a really great arrangement. And you have this set of things that is the song and set of things that are overdubs, and you could do anything you want with them, the little diving guitars. And Greg made some really great choices to ease you into the world of Atmos, one thing at a time. And it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But he could have destroyed it just as easily, but he's a really musical mixer.
Yeah, sure. It's funny because the 2 mixes that everybody asks me about are the 2 simplest, some of the simplest ones I've done. The Miles Davis and the Gregory Porter. There's nothing moving. There's nothing. It's just
fantastic. But you took advantage of the space that you could have brilliantly, absolutely brilliantly. And it doesn't mess with the original.
All those microphones that they recorded at Abbey Road.
Yeah. But I mean, you don't want to mess up Kind of Blue.
No.
Yeah.
And you did not.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah. That's the thing about old records, going back to old records can be difficult. To me, it's actually not as much fun redoing old records. I mean, unless it was a record like I was involved in, like I've recently had to do a couple records that Al actually mixed originally, but they want Atmos versions of it, which is some of the hardest stuff I've ever done for a number of reasons, for some emotional, obviously personal reasons, but also I don't know what he did because he doesn't know what he, like, I was talking to somebody, it's like, look, there's a Van Gogh and here's some paints. Can you give us that? It's like, well, not really, sort of, but, I had to remix a record that I'll mix, and I was there. I sat next to him the whole time. I knew exactly what he did, and it was one of the hardest records I've ever had to mix because I mean, I could get close, but I could also hear the differences between my mix and his mix.
And it's not like you had to figure out what gear he used. I mean, you know, if it was
I
within
know,
this 7-year period, the patch bay didn't change. Like,
I know exactly what he used. I patched it
Yeah.
in, you know. So, but again, it goes back to the guy with the faders.
yeah.
Al didn't mix records with equipment. He mixed it with faders. You know, it was all about how he heard it and what got moved when, and you know, and it was feel for him. He would sit down and ride that vocal, and he would spend an hour riding the vocal, and that's just where it ended up. You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think that he and Rudy Van Gelder for balance are the two, they're top. And Glyn Johns is right behind him.
he's right there too.
But those two, like you talked about Blues and the Abstract Truth, that Oliver Nelson record, it's astounding. Absolutely astounding.
Yeah.
I think you turned me on to that record, actually.
I think so, because that's the record. So we were in LA and I had some really cheap ass turntable and it broke and like everything sucked. And like, I really want to set up a turntable. So I had been out at Doug Sack's place and we were mastering something. And I can't remember, one of the other mastering guys that was there, he was a really, really nice guy. And we were checking out the vinyl in his room and he had an old Marantz.
In Ohio or in Hollywood?
In Ojai.
Okay.
And he had an old Marantz. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get exactly that because that sounded great. I'm going to get that. And I convinced Debbie to let me set it up in the house. And it was like on the floor around the corner from the living room because that was the only place we could put it because it couldn't go on the shelves. And it was just a fucking mess. And I knew I got to put something on that sounds really, really great. And she came in and she's like, all right, that is not staying there. There's no way. And I said, yeah, but let's just have a listen. And I put on Blues and the Abstract Truth. And it's musically, it's not one of my favorite records by a long stretch. But I put that on, shared the first 30 seconds, said, yeah, it can stay. And it stayed exactly like that until we moved out of that house.
Who did it? Who mixed that record?
That was Rudy Van Gelder.
That was Van Gelder.
Yeah.
Stolen,
and I don't think
Stolen Moments is kind of hard to, it's kind of hard to deny that particular tune.
Yeah, that particular track, absolutely. But, and I think that was just a live to 2-track one. There was no mixing, you know, that was, because that's like, is that 62 or something?
Sounds about right. Yeah.
It's that late 50s, early 60s, you know, everything was live to 2-track and he had all the stunt microphones up so nobody would know what he was using and, you know.
The piano nobody could touch, all those.
Yeah.
Yeah. The more I delve into that, you know, because I'm lucky enough to get to talk to people who got to work with Rudy and all that stuff. And they were like, yeah, he pretty much just used the same stuff as everybody else. Like nothing looked different from what everybody else was doing. Like,
yeah.
Kind of what I thought.
And in his living room for half of his career, you know.
What's wrong with the living room?
Nothing.
This is what mine is devolved into. Because I'm cheap and I don't want to pay for studio space.
We are all in our homes.
That's right. Yeah.
Exactly.
What's wrong with the living
Which,
room? It's
you know,
not
I
a
miss
bedroom.
like runners and assistants and, you know, stuff like that too.
Look,
Tax.
when there isn't a food budget, what's the point?
Yeah. Exactly. Always the most important decision of the day. But I miss like, hey guys, it's broken. I'll see you tomorrow. Like, and then I'd come back tomorrow and it would be not broken anymore. You know, that I miss.
Yeah.
But we get very spoiled. And, you know, what do you mean I don't have 2067s? Where are we? What world do we live in?
Steve, just write
Andrew,
yourself
are you
an
recording
email.
this anymore? I know you're, you know, in the country now. When do you get to record?
Almost never.
Do you
to
miss
be honest. In some ways, yes. And in a lot of ways, no. You know, the having to be in a room at a specific time for a number of days and have the pressure of needing to get a certain amount of stuff done, I don't miss that at all. When it's a creative, amazing session, like it's the best thing ever. I mean, I got to produce a record a couple of years ago, and the band that was put together was insane. And we went down to Mono Valley, which is where all my gear was. And that's like some of the best 2 weeks in the studio ever, because I wasn't even engineering. He got Phil Brown into engineer. Like,
Wow.
holy shit. So I was
Yeah.
just sitting and listening and producing and telling like Jeremy Stacy what I thought he should play, which of course he's not into at all. Like, he does not want to hear what you wanted him to play. But, I mean, just details and working on arrangements. And that stuff is absolutely amazing. And I love it. And we shot a start to finish video, which, will come out at some point with Puremix. And when it's going well, it's the best thing ever being in the room with it. But it's one of those things where I could get a panic attack on the way. If I'm in charge of it, like, I know it's going to go okay. But even that, I mean, I've had sessions not that long ago where it just felt like it wasn't going great. And emotionally, that's really, really hard for me. So to be at home, like, I just had a Dante card blow up. And so my studio was fucked for 3 days or 4 days, and I had to get stuff done. But when I decided to give up for the day, I'm home. I'm not like, now I got to get in the car. We were talking about it with Debbie. There were so many days I was driving home from Hit Factory in morning rush hour and had to be back at noon. And like, I don't miss that at all.
Mm-hmm.
No, I don't miss those days at all. No. But I don't know that I could not record. I just love it so much. I get excited especially now when I'm home. I mean, I love being home, but I also love going and seeing people and, hey, we're at the Village today. Who else is here? Like, let's go find somebody. So
I just don't think I trust my engineering enough to be able to relax. It's a little bit stressful for me.
You'll get over it.
But there was something about showing up at the Village and being able to just wander upstairs because you knew Ed was going to be there somewhere.
Well, of course. Yeah. I still wander up thinking Ed's going to be there, and I'm depressed every time.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff hurts sometimes, but
Yeah, we're talking about Ed Cherney, just by the way, for the kids at home.
Yes. Ed was always there and always willing to to tell you how much he wasn't working, even though he was actually working at the time.
And then my favorite phrase.
Ed's working now. Stop talking.
My favorite phrase was, "Who's got reefers?"
Right. We were doing a record. We were mixing some Jackson Browne stuff, and Ed was mixing at Jackson's studio. We were at Capitol, and we were two different projects, but both with Jackson. And Jackson came in and shaking his head. And he was like, "Fucking Ed Cherney, man." I said, "What?" We were like, "What happened?" He said, "So I get to the studio last night, and Ed's standing on the corner smoking a joint." And Jackson, he said, he pulled up and he said, "Hey, Ed, what's going on? How, what are we doing?" He said, "I'm just out here smoking a joint, waiting for Jesus to get the snare right."
Definitely one of the funniest dudes ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Until it wasn't going well, like everybody else, and then it was. I mean, you saw some of the. You were talking about the Rolling Stones sessions. I've seen a couple of those, and it was, I mean, those guys can drive anybody crazy, but
yeah,
I'm sure that was a bit.
But also just effortless. I mean, he made it look so easy. Just like all the other people we've been talking about who are amazing.
Yeah, I mixed. I was Ed's assistant on a record. Actually, it might have been the Rolling Stones record, and I'm watching him, and again, I assisted for a lot of guys, and after a while, I could kind of figure out like how close we were getting, like when we were going to be done, stuff like that. Like Elliot always mixes from left to right, and so the closer he got to me, he's getting close. We're going to be done in an hour, And Ed would he'd throw faders up and pull them down, and and I'm like, what is this guy doing? We're never going to get finished, And then he'd go, okay, and the song would be done, and he did that a couple of times, and then I realized he was learning the song. He was learning the parts.
Planning it all out.
Playing, oh, well, how does that guitar and this guitar work? And what's that? Why is this Wurlitzer here? Oh, it goes with that over there, and then he'd pull it down. And then he'd do that for an hour or two. And then it was easy to mix a song because he had it worked out in his head already, and then it just bang, and the song would be there. It was quite amazing, But again, balance. It's all about the balance.
Yeah. So how's this Atmos segment going for you, Mark?
Perfect. It's perfect.
I got
All
a lot
right.
of speakers in the picture for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's perfect. Okay, I got two for you, and this is sort of like state of industry, but I'm interested in your opinion. So I've seen again, I have to like watch the internet because of what I do, right? So I've seen two waves in the Atmos thing in say like the last year, and the first one was this is awesome. Let's all figure out how to do it, and we can do it in headphones. We don't have to buy speakers, yay! And then the second, more recent one that I've seen, at least on whatever Facebook is feeding me, is who are the speaker manufacturers paying to get on there and talk about Atmos stuff all the time? And it's like a huge corporate conspiracy to like push, music, and Apple Music is forcing everybody to upload Atmos or it won't get playlisted or, and I'm curious,
Sorry,
like,
Mark, I fell asleep halfway through that. It's just, look, you can wear a tinfoil hat in so many different situations.
mhm,
It's not a conspiracy.
right.
Apple wants people to listen to their music service, and they think they found a really great way to help people externalize stuff on headphones, and that's what they're doing. And if you say like, well, they're not forcing anybody to do anything, but because they're pushing it, more than half of their front page space and at least half of their playlists are Atmos. So if you don't have an Atmos mix, how could you be on those playlists? So obviously you don't get the exposure you do if, yeah, they want you to deliver Atmos, but they don't require it. Like, make a record. It's
right. Yeah.
People don't have time. Like, it's like chemtrails, and I'm sure there's some people watching who believe in it, but how many pilots would have to be in on it and not a single one has actually talked about it who's credible? Like, are you kidding me?
Right.
It's
kidding me?
contrails, condensation.
Right. Yeah. Also, your checks will be coming to say that.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And I don't want to offend anybody, so whatever you can believe what you want, but it's
Well,
not
and
a
you
conspiracy.
don't have to do it.
Mhm.
Like I've
No.
had plenty of like I've talked to plenty of mixers, and they're like, "Do I have to get into this? I don't really have the." And I'm like, "Then don't. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. It's okay." Like,
Yeah.
The other thing is, we're kind of like we talk in a bit of a vacuum because we're kind of involved in it, but this is a very small amount of people right now who are A, working in it, and B, either developing or working or even listening to it, to be perfectly honest with you. It's still a very small thing. We all talk about Apple's doing this and Apple's doing that. Apple has such a small share of, of the streaming, I mean, it's still a Spotify world, let's be perfectly honest. So, I think we're on to something new here, but it's going to take a minute. And I'm also a believer that not all records need to be in Atmos.
No.
Especially old records. Like if you lost the multi-tracks, if you don't have it, if they never existed, whatever, fine, don't do it. It's okay. Like,
and I'd be shocked if more than 1% of consumers knew what the hell we were talking about.
Oh, if that. Yeah.
So it's not a conspiracy. Let's just leave that at that.
If it is, I feel horrible because I'm not in on it.
Well, exactly. We'd be getting paid more if it were a conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. You'd think so.
I would
Plus,
hope
I'm
so.
always of the opinion that any conspiracy that involves more than two people is bullshit. Because 3 people can't keep a secret. So
there you go.
Unless they work for Apple, then maybe they can't keep.
Actually, that's different.
Yeah. But I think a lot of those arguments are. Now, I will say, especially like the thing this morning, I don't know if you guys saw the Bob Clear Mountain rant, which I thought was great, about why aren't the original mixers being done. I've been on that from the beginning, even when I worked at the record label. Like I would get a record and be like, hey, are you sure Ed Cherney did this Bonnie Raitt record? Are you sure he doesn't want to do it? Because he's my friend, and I don't want him to be mad at me. But B, it's his record. It wasn't my record. Like, are you sure that these guys don't want to do this? Like, at least give them a chance. If somebody doesn't want to do it, then they don't want to do it. Then go ahead. But I absolutely think the original mixer and the artist should always be involved. Nothing nothing should go out with that. Now I do know a lot of artists who don't give a shit. They don't want to come and listen to the mix. Whatever. I made that record. My manager said it sounded good, so I'm fine with it. That happens quite a bit. But so you will have artists that will all of a sudden go, "Oh, I never heard it." It's like, well, you had the chance to hear it, so that's on you. So that's the other thing is I think that there's a lot of blame being placed on record labels and saying that they're doing this and they're doing this and they're doing this. And to be honest with you, I don't think that's happening as much as, people are not, it's not, the runners are not mixing Atmos versions in studios and stuff like that. It's just, there have been a couple bad things that happened, but whatever, and yeah, it's just, I think it's not quite as drastic as everybody's making.
No, it's just that it's brand new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep. And
all right.
New stuff is scary.
Yeah, it'll take a minute. I'm going to move us to a little bit of Q&A before we get out of here. And we're going to have to pick up where we were 2 hours ago on your next part of your interview.
And I like
going to be free flowing.
Turned it into a panel instead of me. So that's good.
Yeah, it should be. Yeah, Andrew, you should be. Let's get Andrew front and center again.
That's right. All right. So, Steve and John, thank you guys. Thank you so much for joining this.
I had fish cakes.
I just need to know what I'm going to have for lunch. So getting ideas.
I had lunch a long time ago.
Decision.
Yeah. Wait, you guys are 10 hours apart, right? Something?
8.
Oh, 8.
8.
I'm math.
2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon for me. Wow,
yeah.
It's 3 o'clock already.
Yeah.
And there's a baseball game on, and I'm missing it for this.
Well, I appreciate that.
All right. Well, I'm going to let Andrew answer his questions.
Cool.
Yes.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for having me.
Cool.
And good luck. We're all counting on you.
Yeah.
All on you, Andrew.
We'll see, Angie. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Steve. Yeah.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Steve.
Thanks for making the time. All right. Let me figure out how to work this thing. There we go. Awesome. I kicked the guest out.
Now it's just me.
It's Steve's show. There we go. Oh, man. I clicked on the wrong button. Guys, I'm fired.
About time we got rid of that dude.
Yeah.
He was just sitting there.
Should I answer? He's calling in. I could decline it. Okay.
I can answer as Andrew.
I love that you hung up on me.
All right. And now our next guest, Andrew Scheps. Andrew never saw him coming. Awesome.
Andrew,
all
you
right,
should have
let's do
changed
this.
clothes real quick.
It's the costume change moment. All right. Thank you, Steve. Thanks for joining.
See you guys.
See you soon.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
All right.
All right. It is past my bedtime, but we'll definitely answer some of the Q&A because otherwise people are going to be really mad.
All right. Cool. So yeah, and we can definitely get to some later. First one, we'll just pick up the Atmos question here. So this one's from Mike Ornsby, and he says, we're building a Dolby Atmos room. Is there one thing that you would suggest is the most important thing to do Dolby Atmos mixes besides a great room and great gear?
Make sure that there's a way that you can listen to other stuff. Like you need to be able to stream Apple Music or something like it into your speakers. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise you're just going to be able to compare things on headphones, and make a playlist of stuff you think sounds great and it's not about it sounding great, because it should, at this point, it probably sounds pretty close to the stereo mix in terms of sonics, but stuff that you think is like, wow, okay, that one really works for me musically. And then know that there'll be 20 others that are done completely differently that work, but it can give you some idea about stuff. Just like stereo reference mixes, which of course I've been saying for years I don't use, but that's because I get confused. So yeah, you want to be able to listen to consumer stuff. You've got to make sure you can actually hear the Apple spatial as well as the binaural. Obviously the renderer will kick out binaural for you, but you can monitor live in Logic. You send a 714 re-render into Logic and you can listen to the Apple spatialization. So you want to do that. Yeah, past that, I don't know. I mean, if you got the room set up right, that's it. You're done.
Yeah. Yeah. And besides any gear or plugins or whatever. So yeah, that's great. Next question is from Raymond Kunkel in Richmond, Virginia. Say you're a student and cannot really hear 2 decibels of volume difference. How would you be able to hear 2 dB of compression on the 2 bus?
I have absolutely no idea because it's not about like how many dB is on in the compression. The groove will change. Like John Paterno is amazing at that, getting the release time of a compressor to groove. Like I've never do anything like that. I don't hear that. Like when I change the release time, it changes the character of the instrument to me, not the groove, but John hears it as groove. So there's a great video on Puremix of how to listen to compression, and I think that's a great place to start because it really is about the character. It's not about like how much compression, because first of all, the meters are usually weighted towards certain frequencies. Like low mids will make the meter go crazy, and 7K will not, but you will be compressing the same amount. So don't worry too much about it. Now, if you're not hearing 2 dB as level difference, if you change a fader by 2 dB, then you just got to do some ear training and just listen to that. Because technically, I mean, the definition of 1 decibel is that's the smallest level difference that almost all humans would say, like, oh, that got louder. So when you get up to 2 dB, you really should be able to hear it, but not in terms of compression. Just make sure, like, if I turn something up and there's no dynamics processing on it, like, oh yeah, that's louder, then you know you're in the realm of actually listening to balance. Yeah, and don't worry about it. Don't worry. If you can't hear it, it might just be a really transparent compressor. That's fine. There's times I can't hear the compression as compression. So yeah, don't worry too much about it.
Cool. Next question is from Bachelor Gamer in the chat, and he says, "What are your thoughts on top-down mixing?"
What is top-down mixing, Mark? Tell me real quick.
When you start with the stereo bus and then you go through everything after that.
Okay.
You know, yeah.
I think it's important to have your stereo bus processing, at least like the stuff you think you always will use. I mean, you know, you've got a template that should be in from the very beginning, because why would you do the work individually when your mix bus is going to do the work for you later? So that's in from the very beginning, but then I'm immediately working on the tracks. So, you can't tweak the mix bus processing if you don't have what's going into it where you want it to be. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you can really separate the stuff. And if it's top down, like, oh, work on the vocal first and then go the other way down to the instruments. There's some people who do that, and that doesn't work for me. I start with the drums and then the bass and then all the other overdubs. I've listened to the vocals. I've listened to everything. But I know there's going to be room for the vocals because it's the way I hear stuff now when I'm mixing without the vocals. But when you're learning, maybe it's better to get the vocals in really, really quickly. But for me, once the vocals are in, I can't hear anything else because they're so important that I just ignore everything else. And I want to make sure I actually know what all the guitar parts are, so I know that, oh, in that space in the vocal, I can turn this thing up instead of not really knowing what's there. But yeah, I haven't answered that question. I've just talked a lot.
No, yeah, that is an answer. That's a good answer. You have to have the stereo bus in. And chat room, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's what top-down mixing is, but I just heard that for the first time 2 weeks ago. So, yeah, there you go.
Don't tell us if we're wrong.
Yeah, don't tell us if we're wrong. Okay, this one's from Luke in the UK. Do you have a good way to deal with resonance in the vocals without killing the vocal? The more I treat, the more I find, especially when using substandard microphones.
I've seen, like, I get stuff to mix sometimes where there are all these sort of notch filters on a FabFilter EQ3. I don't know how to do that. Like, that always sounds like I'm putting it through a shredder because I'm notching stuff out. But when I get it and someone's done it, it's like, wow, that sounds great. And if I bypass the thing, like, holy shit, that's terrible. What I do usually is I use my omnichannel on fucking everything. So what I'll do, and it's usually low mids that are the resonance, either because of the room or the microphone or whatever. I will use the de-esser to dynamically take care of the low mids, and then I might be EQing those same low mids right back in because that's where the body of the vocal is, but I'm dynamically taking out where it rings and gets really loud, and then I've got a smoother, more consistent amount of those frequencies to then just boost up, and then that's the body. So that's how I deal with it.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm trying to pare this question down a little bit. This next one comes from Adrian in Ohio, and he's wondering if you remember how music felt before you were as successful as you are now, versus how it is now. Do you find things were more special to you back then, or do you still have pieces of music that knock you over like they did prior to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really lucky that if I'm not listening, it used to be on my tannoys and now it's on the PMCs, that if I'm not listening on there, I'm not working. Like, I don't hear stuff even that I've done and think like, ooh, I could just reach in there and work on the kick. Like, sonically, it's not something where I feel like I could do anything about it. So I just listen. Yeah, and it happens all the time. And some of the stuff is stuff that's made me get goosebumps since I first heard it 30, 40 years ago. And sometimes it's new stuff. Absolutely. Like, yeah, I guess I'm really lucky in that way that I am not always critically listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. He also says, for some reason, I believe I've heard your wife makes an amazing potato salad. Can you share the recipe? So there you go. Maybe for a future episode, we can have
She
Debbie.
does make quite a fine potato salad. She makes a lot of amazing food, to be honest. Like, I did have fish cakes for lunch, and they were amazing. Like, best fish cakes I've ever eaten.
Okay. Next question is from Pitch Black in the chat. He says, "Hello, Andrew. I'm James. My question is about SSL plugins. I'm using the Fusion, and I'm not sure where I should place the vintage driver, the saturation. What would be your suggestion with the SSLs?" It's very specific. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've used those plugins a little bit. I'm a fan of harmonic distortion, but yeah, if you're not sure where to put them because it doesn't sound right no matter where you put them, don't use them.
Yeah.
End of story. The only reason to use harmonic distortion, if it isn't just something you like, is because when you EQ something, it isn't doing it. So you need to give it more harmonic content to work with. And so a little bit of distortion is great for that. It generates harmonic content. But other than that, if you don't like it and you can't figure out where to put it, just don't do it. Absolutely don't do it.
Awesome. What are your top 3 favorite electric guitar sounds on records?
Oh, wow. I feel like there are really specific ones I could answer that with. I'm never going to remember what it is, but there is a David Gilmour solo album, and it's like almost the last song on the record, and it's one that was out in 83 because I was interning at a studio in San Francisco after my junior year. No, sorry, 87. Summer of 87 it would have been out, and it wouldn't have been out that long before it. And it is this guitar sound it sounds like it's in a giant fucking room, but it is still so great. So that is awesome. I cannot tell you any more than that. So David Gilmour record that probably came out in 86, something like that. And it'll be obvious which song it is when you hear it, because that's that.
Nice.
There are guitar sounds on the Adrian Belew solo records and the sort of Discipline era King Crimson records that are absolutely insane. And I love that. Including his really clean playing. Like, he plays rhythm stuff on the Tom Tom Club record, the first Tom Tom Club record, that just fantastic. And then I'm actually going to come up with a third one that's amazing. So Roy Harper has an album called Stormcock, and he's like basically a UK folk singer. And he's an huge influence on a lot of other artists, but he didn't seem to really export out of the UK. So this album Stormcock, it's only 4 songs on the whole record. And the first song, if you go to 10 minutes in, there is this riff that he's playing on acoustic guitar, and especially if you crank it, it is one of the most aggressive, awesome acoustic sounds, but most aggressive like guitar sounds ever. And then just listen to any record Joe Barresi's ever done.
Yeah. I mean, right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to expound on it. What's your favorite guitar sound that you've ever recorded?
I have absolutely no idea. It's probably some of the weirder stuff. Like on one of the Low Roar records, there was a song that was just not happening. It just,
Yeah.
and Ryan's like, well, we're not going to put that in the record. And I got up. This is the one record where we were actually all in the studio together. We went down to Mono Valley and I paid for a week for us to go down there. And we just had every instrument in the place set up. And I brought my modular down, and like whatever the fuck we wanted to do, we just did it. And it was great. And so this song was not happening. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to set up a sound that's got a pitch shifter and the electro harmonics. It's like an organ pedal, and I can't remember what it's called right now. And so
Yeah.
I got this sound with the 12 string. So you'd play it and it would be up an octave and ringing and doing all this crazy shit. And then Mike, the other producer, got up, and he's a great musician. I said, okay, play this song. Just bring every chord. And we kept the vocal, and that was it. And Ryan came down. He's like, okay, great. And then we worked on it and we finished it. So I love that sound. There's a song on a Favez record I did, also at Mono Valley, long before my gear was there. It was the second session I ever did there, and that was a great record to do. We did one song start to finish every day. We had 12 songs, and we had 12 days booked, and that's what we did. We started with pre-production every morning, and we were doing background vocals and percussion at night, and it was awesome. And there's one of the songs on that record, which I can't remember the name of, where the guitar player he's fingering the chords, and I had really soft mallets, and I'm just bouncing them on the strings the whole time. And that is the sort of pad in the song. And you have no idea what it is while the song's going on. But then at the very end, you sort of hear the mallets giving out. And my fingers were so fucking sore by the end of that for gripping these mallets. But that was a cool sound. So yeah, for me, it's all the weirder stuff. I don't think I've ever gotten like, oh, that tone is amazing. Like, that hasn't happened.
Chat room, let him know what his best 3 guitar sounds are. It's happened.
You'll let me know.
It's happened.
You'll let me know.
Okay, Peter Y. How are you typically gain staging your shared parallel compressors in terms of making sure the compressors' outputs are not overpowering in the mix, as well as making sure the instruments feeding into the compressors are not overpowering one another, but rather taking advantage of the fact that they're able to interact with each other?
I have no idea how I do the inputs. They just happen because it's in my template and I never look at it, and it's fine. And then I have a VCA all the way down at the bottom, right next to the mix bus, which is all parallel. And that turns all the outputs down. And it used to be that was basically at 0, and I turn it down in the verses. And now it's usually starting life at like -20. And it might get up to -17. I'm just using a ton less parallel compression. But the gain staging is that while I was building things up, like, oh, I want to build a new drum thing. So I'd build a new drum thing, and I'd build it on a song like, oh, that's awesome. And then the next song, like, wow, that sucks. And so I'd see if it would work if I changed input or output or something like that. And if it didn't, like, oh, fuck it, that's just for that one song. And if it did, I'd tweak it. And then the next song, I tweak it some more. And then eventually I'd stop tweaking it. And that's the level it's at. But I really don't know. But I can guarantee you it's different on every song. Like the rear bus thing with the 1176s. Sometimes, I mean, I haven't done it in years now, but I used to when it was hardware, especially, I just turn around and have a look. Sometimes the meters don't move at all. Sometimes they're down the whole time. Sometimes they're pumping.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely no idea what's going on with that thing.
Yeah. And it was just feel.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell when there's too much, but usually I just turn down the outputs, because if you turn down the inputs, well, now it's all going to sound different. Like, I want it to sound the same. I just want less of it. I'm super lazy. If you don't know that by now, you now know. But
Yeah, if
Yeah,
there's one thing that
whatever's
we've established in this interview, it's that you're extremely lazy.
yes.
That's why you've done all that you've done. That's why
Yeah.
you're here.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Another one from the YouTube chat from Panic Room Mastering. How are you dealing with harsh frequencies around 1 to 5 kilohertz on the mix bus?
I don't deal with them on the mix bus. They're
Hmm.
being made by something, and I go find them, and then I use the de-esser usually. I don't EQ stuff like that. I've gotten to the point where most of the time I'm boosting on an EQ, and I use the de-esser on the omnichannel to get rid of stuff.
Cool. Yeah. Good insight. All right. Are you boosting to sort of balance out the problem when you say that you're boosting?
With the EQ?
So
No,
say that
I'm
something's
boosting.
harsh, are you just bringing up bottom to make it
No,
not
no,
be
no,
as
no. If it's harsh, all I'm doing is de-essing those
okay?
frequencies out. I'm just saying in general when I'm working on a sound,
Hmm.
oh, I don't like that. Put a de-esser on it, get rid of it.
Yeah.
Now the EQ is just about tone.
Yeah.
And I really don't cut that often. The time I'll cut is when I'm almost done with a mix and then or like I get a mix note about something like, oh, that thing's too loud. And it's not that it's too loud. It's like it's sticking out and it's sticking
Mm.
out because of some frequency. So I'll dip a little bit
Mm.
there. But usually to take care of stuff, I'm using the de-esser because when it's quiet, there isn't too much of that frequency.
Hmm.
But once it starts to get louder, I suck it out. And then I could even do a broad EQ around that frequency to bring it back up, like I was talking about with the body of the vocal. So same with the mid range. Like if you've
Yeah.
got something really harsh in an electric guitar, okay, you need to take it out. But at the same time, you need those frequencies. Otherwise, it doesn't sound like an electric guitar. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Okay. Awesome. One last question for you for this interview. And if you submitted a question and we didn't get to it yet, we will save it for part two. Um, this is from Mike Stoke in the UK. And although you're
Thanks
not
for
drinking
staying up.
wine, in your expert opinion, what is the greatest beer in all of England?
Uh, that is a real blow to my psyche because I've stopped drinking
Hmm.
and it wasn't because I was in trouble from drinking. It's like I can't drink now. It just does something to my head immediately.
Mm.
Immediate one sip and it's like I got a headache and it's not happening. So
Mm.
anyway, but this is going to be an answer that anybody can argue with, but they won't be able to because most likely they've never had this beer. My local pub, which is very weird, the Fruiterers, which I've been to a lot, and it's the pub that Fab was talking about that we had my birthday party in. They used to have a brewery attached to it, and they made a beer called Arrowhead, which was just it's an ale, and it was so good. And it was pretty inconsistent, but when it was good, it was the kind of thing like, man, I know I'm going to pay for this, but I'm having 6 pints tonight because holy shit, is this good?
It's on today.
So
Yeah.
that was my favorite beer when it was good.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, we have so much left to cover. We had so many guests and everything, and I
That
kind of
was
wanted to
awesome.
let it go
That was
free
great.
flow. And yeah, we put our marker down on our track now because we can do it on the track level. We put our marker down at Jay-Z's 99 Problems. So when we do part two, that's where we'll start. And I'm gonna try to make a whole lot more ground than we did today. But it was a lot of fun today. So
Awesome.
yeah, thank you for
I've
doing
talked a
this.
lot more than I used to on these things.
Yeah, you had to talk a lot more and think probably.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, we're going to set a date and it can't be in too long because
no,
we don't want to
yeah,
lose momentum.
yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. Um, you had a ton of things come in from people saying thank you for all of the interviews that you did during the live stream and people that have gone back and watched them since then and all that stuff. So you've had a lot of really
awesome.
good feedback from
That's
that.
great. It was really, really great to do. I almost feel guilty for not doing more, but yeah, I'm really glad people like them.
Yeah,
Because they were really
absolutely.
fun to do. And there's something that felt almost important. Like I love the
Hmm.
fact that we have one with Al sitting
Yeah,
in his backyard, you know.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, and the interview style is great and everything, which I'm doing a terrible job at. See what happens.
No, you're
Let me
not
know.
at all. This has been super fun. It's been great.
So,
It's been really,
cool.
really great.
Awesome.
I just can't believe anyone gives a shit about what I have to say, but I'm all for it.
We definitely need a part 2. We'll see if we get to a part 3.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andrew. I'll
Thanks,
see you in the
Mark.
next one. All
Yes,
right.
you will.
All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you.
Bye.
Bye.